you ready for a deep dive into one of the most intense animated series out there? Welcome to Radioactive Ramblings, where we are currently breaking down the world of Invincible. Each week, we're going to unpack the jaw-dropping twists, the unforgettable characters, and that trademark brutal action. From Mark Grayson's journey to the darker side of heroism, to our continued love of Debbie, we've got every moment covered.
Mark, I don't want to hurt you.
I'm not the one who's gonna get hurt.
You said you don't do threats.
Yeah, well, people change.
Whether you're a longtime fan or just getting started, tune into our exclusive takes, fan theories, and so much more. Catch new episodes of Radioactive Ramblings every week, your go-to podcast for all things Invincible and more.
Welcome back to the penultimate episode of the Lorehounds Oscars 2025 Prep Series. I'm your host, Elysia, soon to be joined by host of the Oscars Death Race podcast, Paulo Batista, to talk through some of the biggest categories of the night: lead and supporting actor and actress, directing, and cinematography. Check the links in the show notes to catch up on any episodes you might have missed. There's the mini intro episode with David with important info about the season and explanations for things like this phrase, death racers, I keep using. Also, the animation episode, two of my personal favorite categories, a breakdown of the evolving Emilia Perez controversy, the Nevermind the Oscars music crossover episode with lots of music clips and analysis, a special spotlight coverage episode of a possible Best Picture winner, Conclave, a breakdown of the documentaries with a documentary editor, the live-action shorts as a palette of emotions, a deep dive into the international and screenplay categories, and coverage of some of this year's biggest films in the production, design, and audiovisual tech awards. One more episode coming after this, covering the Best Picture nominees with David, and some of you chimed in as well. This episode, a usual spoiler policy applies. You don't have to have seen any of the movies yourself. We'll give you the log line for each and avoid any major spoilers while giving you our hot takes and breaking down why each film is or isn't worthy to win the prize, according to us. And now, let's bring in Paulo to break down the numbers. As of this recording, who was most likely to win? Stick around until the end for an update on the tightest races we'll talk about today, following the events of a few more awards shows that happened this week. And thank you, Paulo, for being here. You are another person who I know through the Academy of Death Racers, and listeners may recognize you, those who listened last year. And you also have your own, the Oscars Death Race podcast, which is linked in the show notes. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. So my name's Paulo. I am a podcaster at night, by night, who does the Oscars Death Race podcast. The tagline is, we try to watch all the Oscar nominees or die trying. For those who don't know, right, the Oscars Death Race has been around for over a decade at this point online in some form or another. But it's really, I feel like I hopped in the Parasite year when Parasite won Best Picture, and I feel like from that point I really seen the community kind of grow into something a lot more organized, right? And part of that might be that, right, that a lot more movies are available for streaming online nowadays. But even before, right, before I was death racing, I know there were folks who would make trips to completely different states or even different countries just to try to catch the films that were just so they could try to watch every single Oscar-nominated movies, not just the Best Picture, not just the above-the-line stuff, but even all the technical, the sorts, the international categories, which made it difficult when sometimes they would get qualified, but then didn't have a theatrical release just yet. So you have to find it at some random film festival in the middle of nowhere to go see it.
Yeah, we complain about it now, but I guess we should keep in mind that it used to be a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly. Early for a lot of this season, kind of like, at least here in the US, right? One of the big problems was the short film Death by Numbers, which we weren't sure it was going to come to the sorts program in theaters, and then for a while, Porcelain War also looked like the documentary looked like it might not make it out, but it's had a couple of screenings here and there. So I was
And
totally willing.
also, I'm
Yeah.
still here outside the US and Brazil is
Oh,
difficult still.
yeah. I was fortunate enough. So I'm based in New York, and I was fortunate enough to actually see that at the New York Film Festival, which is I got ahead of that before it was even nominated. So I will say I'm even in an even more privileged place than a lot of other death races, just because being in New York, I do have a lot
Yeah.
of access to a lot of films.
Yeah, that helps. That helps. And so you're a death racer. You have watched all of the ones we've seen today, although you confessed just before we started you haven't finished Maria, which is fine. You've seen enough. I may not spoiler alert, I don't love that one. Um but you are also kind of like the stats guy in the group. You know, you're always the one who's charting out, well, this one, this, and the record is this, and yeah.
Yeah, so I said I'm a podcaster by night, but by day I actually work in digital advertising, looking at a lot of spreadsheets every day, a lot of analysis of just how different things are going. I used to have a podcast that I'm not going to say is dead, but it's kind of on an indefinite hiatus called the Box Office Watch podcast, where I would kind of like just look at numbers of how different movies were doing at the box office and kind of like what it says about like the entertainment industry overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm definitely like a more numbers oriented person. Always have been. So in if you visit the Oscar race subreddit, you might find a couple of posts of mine where I have posts. I have a couple pulled up that we're going to talk about, like how often do above the line winners come from non Best Picture nominated films, right? Or looking at the overlap between the big trifecta groups. The New York Film Critics group, the LAFCA and NSFC, to see how when something overlaps there, how often does that correlate to a win, right? Because obviously, right, like looking at precedent is not perfect. There's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be rule breakers. But at the very least, when it comes to trying to set a baseline for expectations, I think it really
Mm-hmm.
helps to have an idea of like what's come before, so you know when to. If the pattern says to zig, but you can tell based on the zig, okay, there's just enough here that I'm comfortable zagging in my prediction.
Right. So, I mean, I'm going to call out the Gold Derby favorites. I'm going to call out my own favorites, and I hope you do the same. But I know you're also bringing other stats to the table as well.
Yeah, so I've put together a bit of a model. So it kind of goes off of the principle of wisdom of the crowds, right? Like no one knows exactly what's going to happen, but if you look at enough people, and Gold Derby operates on this principle, if you look at enough people who know a little bit about something, eventually you'll get a consensus, and that is usually more accurate than any individual person trying to pick.
Right.
I ran for my podcast. I ran a nominations prediction contest where you try
Mm-hmm.
to predict how many, like each nomination, all 120 nominations. Only one person beat Gold Derby, actually. Out of like the 40 something entries I got in my contest, Gold Derby
Mm-hmm.
is still by far the most accurate. I have also incorporated, so Gold Derby has kind of like been the gold standard so far. Next best picture is a little bit of a smaller group that is from a bunch of kind of like award pundits, so to speak, journalists, writers, kind of more in tune with the industry, who have access to like these screenings and so on, talking to people. And then the Oscar Expert, the YouTube channel, put together an app called Awards Expert, where it's kind of essentially Gold Derby. I think it's slanted a little bit more heavily toward Gen Z, I think, from what I
Okay.
can tell. So I've incorporated their rankings. So I have a little bit of a model that kind of looks at, okay, looking at these three sources, who is the consensus pick among these sources, and from there I can kind of week over week essentially measure how has one film moved up, how has one film moved down in whatever rankings, for whichever category, right? I'm kind of see that in real time, not just within one prediction platform, but across multiple prediction platforms, how it's moved consensus wise.
Cool. And for any listeners who want to make their own Oscar predictions, after some prodding from a couple people in the Discord, and then Doug came forward with the idea of creating our own Lorehounds group in the ESPN prediction site. So there'll be, you can find that discussion going on in the Discord under award season, under current shows. But I'll also put a link in the show notes to the Lorehounds ESPN prediction site in case you want to join that pool and see how we all stack up together.
Also, I'm actually going to be running a winner prediction contest for my podcast, also,
Mm-hmm.
mostly
Mm-hmm.
hosted in the Academy of Death Racers Discord, but also the Oscars Death Race subreddit. I'm actually going to be offering a prize, though. It's a prize for charity. So
Okay.
basically, obviously, with the fires happening in LA,
Yeah.
I'm going to be offering whoever predicts the most correct Oscar nominations, with some tiebreakers involved if there's a tie.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever predicts the most will I'll donate some amount of money to be determined, probably like $50 to $100 or so, maybe
Mm-hmm.
more, to a LA-based charity of their choice to help support fire efforts.
Okay.
So check out my podcast for more information about that as well.
All right, awesome. And again, that's linked in the show notes. So today we're going to be focusing on the acting, directing, and cinematography categories. So that's 6 categories in total, 4 for acting. And like the tech episode, we're going to be running through the list of nominees per category in alphabetical order, and then talking about the entire category as a whole. So let's break into Best Actress is the first one on the docket, and the nominees are Cynthia Erivo, who plays Elphaba Throp in Wicked, Carla Sofia Gascon, who plays Emilia Perez / Juan Manitas Del Monte in Emilia Perez, Mikey Madison, who plays Honora Annie Mikiva in Honora, Demi Moore, who plays Elizabeth Sparkle in The Substance, and Fernanda Torres, who plays Eunice Paiva in I'm Still Here. And so these are all films that we've talked about in previous episodes, and we're going to be talking about all 5 of these also in the Best Picture finale. So these are films that have come up again and again, but do see the show notes for separate deep dives into Wicked and the Emilia Perez controversy. But Paolo, do you have anything you want to add on the latter?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been said already, right? I think,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, anything like whatever that this content is pretty horrible. So, I think though my quasi hot take, I don't know if this is really a hot take. People were saying that
Mm-hmm.
Emilia Perez was, the front runner. They had 30 nominations. They had the most nominations. Of course, they're going to be, the front runner for Best Picture. I never really thought that was the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you look at Netflix's track record, they
Mm-hmm.
are abysmal when it comes to. They're really good at getting nominations, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just pulling up the numbers right now. Over from 2018 to 2024, they've had 128 total nominations, but only
Mm-hmm.
16 wins in
Mm-hmm.
non-short categories. So that's about 13%. And if you look at above the line nominations, right, you know, it's something like well, yeah, it's terrible, right? It's something like three out of 58 nominees, only 5%.
Mm.
2 of those were directors, for Cuarón for Roma,
Mm.
Campion for Power of the Dog, and then Laura Dern for Marriage Story for supporting actress, right? So not a really great chance for Emilia Perez in the first place. Gascon specifically, right, I think was always kind of like in the 4th or 5th spot for here. So kind of,
Mhm.
looking broader at Emilia Perez, the only categories that I think were ever really in play were supporting actress for Zaldana, who we'll talk about in a little
Mhm.
bit. International feature, which I think is at this point kind of like a neck and neck race, maybe slanted a little bit more. Uh,
I wish it weren't so neck and neck.
yeah, and then song, right? Which I have a stat that I
Mhm.
pulled up that, like, if a film has two songs nominated, it is pretty guaranteed to win best song,
Ugh. Mhm.
unless you're up against Lord of the Rings, or you're up against I Just Called to Say I Love You, the #1 Billboard song of the year, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Al Mal is probably pretty safe for song in general. All the
Mhm.
others I don't think were really like the other take I have is that Netflix is good at getting nominations because they're really good at getting the film out there before nominations, right? Because it's on their service. A lot of these other films, like you mentioned that, like, before the show, I'm Still Here, really hard for people to see, right?
Mhm.
Outside of the U.S. and Brazil, and even within the U.S., right? At the time of nominations, it wasn't really widely available. But once nominations do happen, right, because Netflix doesn't really get any value add from a business by having things win, like they don't really see an increase in signups because they have a Best Picture winner, or they have any kind of winner, right? They don't really have that bump to subscription
Mhm.
numbers. Whereas something like The Brutalist or Anora or whoever else, they're playing in theaters, right, throughout award season. That's where they're making their
Mhm.
money because of the nominations. And then there's obviously the Oscar bump in theaters, where after they
Mhm.
win, right, whenever something does win, it'll get even more of a boost at the box office. And a better box office for these films kind of translates to better deals down the line for back end, for streaming, for licensing, for any physical media that gets made. So these other studios have an incentive to really go hard in their campaigning after the nomination, whereas Netflix, all they really want is to get something nominated in the first place, I think, from an economic point of view. So I think that's why
Right.
Emilia Perez was never really going to be a super big winner numbers wise.
Yeah. Well, by the way, speaking of the song, do listen to the music episode that I did with Mark from Nevermind the Music, where we break down, we play clips of all the songs and break down the musicality of them, and we talk about what songs we
Mm.
want to win. Spoiler alert, it's not El Mal. um,
Yeah, me neither.
uh, yeah. What is your, so in the best actress category, what are your personal favorites?
Yeah, so I watched all of these, and I would say, I mean, I definitely have a bit of a bias toward Fernanda Torres. I think,
Okay.
um, beyond just like this online joke, I'm some Filipino Americans. So this is a bit of an online joke that like Filipinos and Brazilians online are like simpatico, basically. And like I think like during the Olympics, like the Brazilians would cheer for the Filipino athletes, and Filipinos would cheer for the Brazilian athletes. But even beyond that, I think part of that there is some truth to that because, you know, being Filipino American, growing up with stories of martial law in the Philippines at the time,
Mm,
kind of like seeing the story of Eunice Paiva, played by Fernando Torres, and being like that powerhouse performance there, I think, you know, having all this range of emotions from strength, love for her husband, love for her children, fear, having the resolve to be strong for her children and for her family, trying to find out what happens, you know, all of this range of emotions that she gives in both dialogue and in kind of like the non-verbal part of her acting, really I think it's just like a complete package all around, right? Obviously, you know, all of the other most of the nominees I think are really great. Demi Moore
mm-hmm.
particularly, you know, I'm not a body horror person in general,
Mm-mm.
so I kind of put off watching The Substance until I really had to. But I was really impressed with how effective she was at communicating with just how little dialogue that particular role had, right? Uh,
Right.
I think if between the two, right, and these are the two front runners, but according to my model, right, you know, it's
Are
right.
Torres and Moore, not Madison?
No, well, so I did update this model
Okay.
last on the 10th. So this is before BAFTAs
Mm-hmm.
came out. But I do still have, according to the prediction model, Demi Moore and I'm Still Here are 1 and 2, though it's pretty consensus. Moore's number 1 across the board. I'm Still Here is number 2 for 2 out of the 3 sites I'm looking at, followed by Honora for 2 out of 3 is number 3 on those sites. So it's kind of like that. That's the 1, 2, 3 in that order. Personally, I really like Fernando Torres, but you know, and of any of those 3, I wouldn't be upset by a win of any of those 3.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same. Well, actually, I wouldn't be upset by a win out of 4 out of the 5. And that is to say, like, Carla Sofia Gascon did do a good job acting. I just think she's completely taken out herself out of it
I
with
mean,
her off-screen behavior. And I'm not rooting for that movie for all the reasons that
yeah,
we've
I mean,
talked about.
even outside of that, I think it didn't help that like in that particular performance, again, we'll talk about it later, Zoe Saldana, I
Mm-hmm.
think, completely outacted Gascon in that
Mm-hmm.
particular role as well, right? So that kind of takes away from
Yeah.
Gascon's sign as like lead actress.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Fernanda Torres is the dark horse potential winner. She did win. So, Golden Globes, they do the division between drama and musical and comedy. So, Torres won at the Golden Globes for drama, and then Demi Moore won at the Golden Globes for musical and comedy. For which is a funny thing. I guess The Substance is a comedy. I guess it is.
It's a dark comedy.
Yeah, it's a dark comedy, but she won for that, and I'm always coming from the perspective, in contrast to Paolo, where I'm looking at the narratives of the season, and Demi Moore had a great narrative with.
Okay.
She gave this speech at the
Yeah,
Golden
that
Globes.
that's what definitely set her over the edge, right? Like that
Hmm.
was probably the defining moment of this campaign, frankly. Like the Globes, for all of like the like how kind of I don't like the Globes as much as an institution, right?
Uh huh.
But that
Okay.
aside, right, and I don't take them too seriously most of the time when it comes to Oscar predictions, just because they're not the same voting body, right? It's like a bunch
No.
of like random journalists as opposed to members of the actual academy. But here this year was the Globes were really important because it allowed Moore to give a speech, and it allowed Torres, right, to kind of give a speech and get visibility for her role. So then people watched her
Hmm.
the film for her role, which was enough to catapult it actually the best picture because they liked it so much.
Yeah, yeah, it was a surprise Best Picture nominee. But then at BAFTA, which is so the British Academy Awards, which happened last night as we're recording, it'll be about a week in the past, I think, by the time this episode's released. But Mikey Madison beat Demi Moore there, but she lost the Rising Star Award, which was interesting. It was kind of like saying like she's not a rising star. This movie just immediately put her in the big leagues. So
Yeah, I mean,
if I think that Demi Moore and Mikey Madison are the two front runners, and to be honest, I would be very happy with either of them for different reasons. Like I really wish I could give it to them both.
yeah,
That's my opinion.
I would say, I think the other thing to think about here is kind of like who are the contingents of like who votes at the academy, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I have noticed right over the years is that the academy generally has gotten a lot more diverse, a lot more international, right? Which I think there's like this growing
Right.
international contingent. So there may be, I think, something going for Fernand towards there in terms of there might be, a lot of international voters who really want to support her as an international artist. I think that might be
Mm-hmm.
another thing, plus in her column in terms of trying to predict who's going to win. Again,
And who's calling Madison or
and Fernando
Moore?
Torres's
Oh, it's
because he's
Fernando Torres.
international.
Sorry, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
I mean, that said, I think we're splitting hairs here. Any of
Mm-hmm.
these three, I think, gave a worthy performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's at this point, it's just appreciate the art. I think among
Yeah.
those three for sure.
Yeah, I think in terms of for the performance, I would go for Mikey Madison just because of how much she threw herself into this role. She learned Russian, she learned pole dancing. She just gave all of the nuanced emotions, that just the micro expressions in her eyes, but also combined with this like wildcat behavior, which is part of what makes the movie kind of a fun watch. Well, a very fun watch. But Demi Moore has that narrative, and I want you. So the crazy thing is none of the four of them have been nominated at all before. Demi Moore has really not gotten any recognition. So for that reason, I am also rooting for her. And I have to shout out respect for Cynthia Erivo. She's the only one in this category with prior nominations for Best Actress and Best Song stand up for Harriet from 2019. And she also, by the way, won the BAFTA Rising Star Award in 2018, the one that Mikey Madison didn't get last night. So
Yeah.
I
I mean,
think she'll.
the other thing for Cynthia was she's the first Black woman to be nominated more than once in Best
Okay. Oh,
Actress
I didn't know
behind
that.
Viola Davis as well. So
Okay.
yeah, and I mean, who know? I don't know what the race is going to be exactly next year, but there's a very good chance he could get nominated again for Wicked for Good later this year as well.
Right.
And even if
That's true.
she isn't likely going to win the EGOT this year, there is a
Yeah.
chance she could do it next year.
Right. Yeah. Because that's the other important thing about her is that this would complete an EGOT for her. So I think she'll get that. She's still quite young. She'll get that EGOT. I'm certain. I don't think it's going to be this year though.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to. Would you have any last thoughts about Best Actress?
Yeah, no, I mean, Gascon's nonsense aside, again, I think this is a very solid category all
Yeah.
around. I'm trying to think back on like who could have potentially been nominated that was potentially missed out. I think the only big one was Marianne Jean Baptiste for Hard Truths was kind of like the sixth one, kind of like looking in. Some
Yeah.
people were saying Pamela Anderson.
I'm going to call out Amy Adams for Night Bitch. I
Yeah,
think that Night Bitch as a movie, it's a movie about where she's a mom who is kind of turning into a dog, but is it psychological? Is it real? Um, and I think that she gives a killer performance, but the movie just didn't get much recognition overall, so she just kind of got forgotten about.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, I didn't see Nightbit, so I can't really comment there on how that was. Um, yeah. Oh, also, I'll shout out Julianne Moore from Room Next Door. I really enjoyed that performance from her as well.
Okay, okay. Okay, moving on to Best Actor. The nominees are Adrian Brody for as Laszlo Toth in The Brutalist, Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown, Coleman Domingo as John Divine G. Whitfield in Sing Sing, Rafe Fiennes as Cardinal Thomas Lawrence in Conclave, and Sebastian Stan as Donald Trump in The Apprentice. And again, almost all these films have been discussed in other categories. Do see the Conclave deep dive in the show notes. And yeah, Sing Sing and The Apprentice do not have Best Picture nominees. The other three do. Sing Sing, I'm a bit sad about it not having Best Picture. The Apprentice, that feels right. So yeah, The Apprentice, that's a film we haven't discussed in this series yet. It's basically about the rise of Donald Trump, and it purports to tell the story of how he became who he is now. But if I'm honest, my biggest problem with it is I think they created a character arc that didn't exist in real life. As someone who grew up in that area and saw him since I was a young kid, I don't think there was this nice guy before that suddenly changed. But it did get 2 acting nominations, so this and supporting. So we'll be talking about it again in a minute. And you can watch it on Prime if you want to see it for yourself. What are your overall thoughts on The Apprentice, Paolo?
Yeah, I literally just finished this last night.
Okay.
I've been putting it off just because everything in the news, and it's like, do I really want to watch the Donald Trump film? But I know I had this episode, and so
Mhm.
if I wasn't going to watch the movie, I had to at least watch this one. It's had 2 nominations going for it, right? Um, I mean, I think Sebastian Stan. I haven't posted this question to the Discord yet, but he has got to win an Oscar sometime in the next 10 years for sure, right?
Sure.
Like he's got to win something at some point. He's just so good. Like
Uh-huh.
he had 2 amazing films last year. This and a different man, right?
Yes. And if he
Um,
were nominated for the other one, I would be rooting for him.
yeah, I mean, I can't say like I'm rooting for him in the sense that like I think he gave the best performance. I think he did a really good performance though. I think it was
Mhm.
really transformative. I think
Mhm.
the particularly really interesting thing is like yes, like maybe the character arc didn't really exist
Yeah, but that's not his fault.
in the film, but that's
He
not his fault,
Yeah.
right? But the fact like what he was given with and kind of like this arc, like the arc that does exist within the film of kind of like
Uh-huh.
this neophyte young real estate developer up until writing like about the time when he was like doing the art of the deal book, like
Mhm.
that character arc and the seeing that character transformation entirely is just a feat of masterwork, right? So
Yeah.
I fully expect Stan to like Sebastian Stan to get a win within the next 10 years, if not sooner.
Yes.
Definitely would love to see that for him as well. Yeah, I mean, film wise, I mean, we'll talk about Jeremy Strong a little bit later, but he's
Yeah.
obviously the other standout of this film as well. And I guess
Mhm.
maybe the hair and makeup could have gotten a nomination as well, maybe.
I'm not
But
sad
yeah,
about it not.
yeah, fair enough. But yeah, Sebastian Stan's is a national treasure at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think he did a great job, like, mimicking the mannerisms and such of Trump, but I just think that A Different Man, for anyone who doesn't know, we talked about it in makeup, but it in it's such like, that's also a transformative role, and he does have, makeup that's removed, but I think it just demands so much more from him,
I mean,
so many more interesting things.
I totally did not believe until I saw Pearson later on that it was actually like Sebastian Stan in the first part of the film under that makeup for the
Yeah.
first half of the movie, right? Like, oh, they totally have to be having Pearson play this part, and then he plays
Mhm.
after it's coming. No, he's playing the whole first part with the makeup, which is crazy.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's about a guy with facial tumors who does a surgery that gets removed, and then he finds that it doesn't fix his whole life. Basically, he still is the person who he is. He has to learn. Now he's becoming more cocky because now he looks like Sebastian Stan, and meanwhile Adam Pearson, who should have gotten a supporting actor nod in my book, comes in, and he's actually has these facial tumors, and you might know him from, oh, sorry, what is the one with
Under the
Scarlett
skin,
Johansson?
under the skin.
Under the Skin. Thank you. You might know him from that film. But he comes in and just kind of like keeps stealing the show from Sebastian Stan, which I think is also remarkable,
Yeah,
just to see how these 2 men play off each other. It's a really good film, and there's a third character who's, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, he and Sebastian Stan, he won for at the Golden Globes for A Different Man. And then
yeah,
he was kind of almost like defensive on the stage when he was like, I was in 2 good films this year, because I think this was
yeah,
before we knew that that The Apprentice was going to get Academy Award nominations. But of course, people are just kind of like, people just don't want to. A lot of people don't want to watch a movie about Trump right
yeah.
now,
I mean, on one hand, it would be a hilarious troll of the Academy if somehow Stan were to win for this portrayal, after like the administration has been like, no, this is like a terrible movie, no one should watch it, and then he ends up winning best actor. That would be a masterful troll. Not going to happen. But
No.
yeah, I mean the other part, right? Kind of on that part, like going back to like the nomination period, we didn't think Stan was getting nominated at all for a long time, right? We thought that it was going to
Mm,
be Daniel Craig in Queer for his
mm,
portrayal of that character, which also was a flawed film, I'll say, but clearly Craig was the best. Daniel Craig was the best thing in there. We thought that it would split. Some people would vote for Stan for Apprentice, some would vote for Different Man, and that splitting of the vote would make it difficult for him to get a nomination, and Craig would get in instead. So yeah, I mean the fact that Stan was able to get this coalition around The Apprentice, I think, definitely is impressive.
yeah. 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 So outside of The Apprentice, what's your overall thoughts on this category?
Yes, I mean, kind of looking at the numbers, right? I mean, the clear number
Mm-hmm.
one and number two prediction wise, right, is Adrian Brody and Timothy Chalamet. I Speaking on the other two, Conclave is one of my favorite films of the year. I think Lawrence is a little bit of an Fienn's character in Conclave is a little bit of an understated character overall. He's definitely the protagonist, but he definitely has like that interiority, that complexity to him, but doesn't quite have like the big showy acting bits as opposed to like say, um, you know, his role in Schindler's List as supporting actor, right? Like it doesn't quite have like that
Mm-hmm.
grandiosity, which like Brody and Salome kind of carry their films for a big part of it. So love Fiends, would love to see him get an Oscar, but not. I don't think it's going to happen. Coleman Domingo in Sing Sing, I think it also did like a really great performance as well. That's I think unfortunately a case where A24 has kind of just botched the rollout for that one,
Mm,
and chose to focus on the Brutalist instead. So that's just like kind of a victim of the campaigning process, so to speak. Amazing film, amazing performance. Again, would love to see Domingo also get a win in the next 10 years, if not sooner, as well.
yeah.
I think he's definitely on track for that. Between this and the nomination for Rustin last year, he just needs like that big juicy role from like a major studio, I think, to get there.
Right. Yeah. So this is Domingo's second year in a row nominated, and he's just a personal favorite of mine in general. We talked about Sing Sing more in the music and writing episodes, but yeah, it's basically it's kind of amazing that it's on here at all. I remember it was around this time last year that we finally saw the trailers for Sing Sing because it just took so long for that film to come out,
Yeah, it was
and
at the 23 Toronto International Film Festival. And then it came out in like July, but only up to like 100, 200 theaters here in the US, which is like not a wide
hmm
release. And then it got pulled completely, never came to streaming. So yeah, it was just a case of A24 just not having the ducks in a row. Kind of like with the Iron Claw last year, I think, also for
mm,
Oscar season.
yeah, yeah, the Claw fell through the cracks, and luckily this one did not fall through the cracks. It got 3 nominations, which is great, and yeah, I mean, I'm rooting. I guess I'm rooting for Domingo. I think Adrian Brody is the favorite to win. This would be his
Yeah.
second Oscar after The Pianist from 2002, when at 29 he became the youngest Best Actor winner. But the upset could be Chalamet. This is his second nomination after Call Me by Your Name, and if he were to win this time, he
Yeah.
would become the new youngest winner by a few months.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and we
funny.
talked about it in the Conclave episode, but this is Fiennes' third nomination after Schindler's List for supporting in The English Patient. So he's overdue, but maybe it's not going to be this one, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so first off, Brody, right? It's funny, like he's the favorite to win by far. I think he won BAFTA also yesterday. So I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Salome has really has gotten a win yet, major win this
Mm-hmm.
award season. Maybe at the SAG Awards he might be able to do that, though. Who knows? Though, okay, so on Salome, I like I wasn't never really a big Bob Dylan fan. Kind of in the same
Mm-hmm.
way that we talked about Sebastian Stan and Trump, kind of showing the progression over the years. I think Salome did a really great job in like doing that progression of Bob Dylan over the years of his different personas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to some degree, I think it's a little bit more of a technical acting category in the, hey, look at how much stuff he did to prepare for this role. He's doing all of
Mm-hmm.
his own singing, kind of like that's part of like what's pushing him to win here.
Yeah.
Not going to say it's like not an interior or like a nuanced emotional performance, but definitely less so than Brody's, which is like I think carried a lot by that pathos, that
Mm-hmm.
emotion, that variety of character, right?
Right.
The containing
He's a
multitudes within.
volatile character. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, Salome did a great job as Bob Dylan. I would not be surprised if we see, since they're not doing the song performances at the Oscars this year, I would not be surprised to see them have Salome come up and do a couple of Bob Dylan songs on stage.
Yeah.
So if he wins, I wouldn't be too upset by that. That's it.
No.
I think Brody is close to a lock. Not 100% sir, but it's also kind of funny, right? Brody doesn't win Oscars except when he plays a Holocaust survivor in a film that is two words, the and then ist, and the word that ends in ist. So
The pianist. Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, so we've talked about The Brutalist in a number of other categories as one of the most nominated pictures this year. But just in case you missed those episodes, he plays Laszlo Toth, who is an architect, and The Brutalist refers to the brutalism style of architecture. But architects not too happy with the film on that front.
yeah,
I feel vindicated because I don't understand why people love The Brutalist so much,
yeah,
but there are aspects of it
yeah.
that I think are great. But then
I
I
mean,
think
I
it's kind
think
of a mess.
this will be what I come to defend the Woodlands. It is, I think,
Hmm.
for me, my choice for best picture
Okay.
of everything. I think on one hand, right, there is the production element of it, right? The fact that this was made for only like $10 million and is as
Hmm.
epic as it is, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Visually great.
yeah, I think there is it's kind of like a return to like that old school like epic American dream story, right? To some degree, but also there is, I think, an element of like it's the most grand, I think, but perhaps excepting Dune and Wicked, which have much bigger
Hmm.
budgets, right? Of like kind of like the smaller indie films this year, it is like the most grand in scope, I think,
Hmm.
right? What I think adds to like the splendor. I mean, the fact that there's like a intermission halfway through is kind of like
Yeah.
the return to old school cinema, which I appreciated.
Yeah,
I'm
but
here for a
no
lot.
old school cinema was 3.5 hours long.
Yeah,
It didn't need to be that long. That's one of my problems with it.
it didn't need to be that long, but I think the fact that it did was, I think it still made use of the 3.5 hours. I will admit that maybe like the second half isn't quite as strong as the first half, though Felicity Jones definitely is more than worth. I think the second half, like her
Hmm.
character there. I don't know. I think it is. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I think it is the most ambitious. For me, I think I really like films that are very ambitious and
Hmm.
swing for the fences, right? And I think that's what
Sure.
why I would go for the Brutalist more so than others. I think.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I agree with you that it did swing for the fences. I think that other films did as well and
Yeah.
hit the ball better
Yeah,
or whatever.
it's a matter of
Yeah.
of scale, right? How much do you
Yeah.
swing versus how much you hit? Like the Brutalist
Yeah.
hit some, maybe not as much
Mhm.
as it swung. So it's like
Mhm.
do you go for the one who attempts more and maybe misses some versus those that maybe attempted a little bit less but hit everything was trying to go for, right? That's like kind of like
Mhm.
the question there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we already talked about the writing and stuff, but yeah, my problem is just that the writing to me felt not as deep as it tried to do too many things, and so it didn't do any of them with any particular depth,
Yeah.
which is what I'm
Yeah.
looking for in a film like this.
Like a single-minded focus on like what the film, like the substance for example, is very very
Sure,
singular in what
very,
it's
but it
doing.
doesn't have to be like that singular in focus, but just in general, I just think that The Brutalist has a lot of ideas and should have spent a bit more time honing them.
True. I think a lot of the Brutalist will come from what you bring to the film, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, right, like there's obviously like a whole narrative of like the immigrant experience that's in there,
Mhm.
right? So, for me myself, right, like as
Yeah.
a child of
I'm an
immigrants and
immigrant.
so on. Oh, fair. But like for me, like within the U.S. and kind of like that system, I feel like for me that's what I took away from the film most, right?
Mhm.
Maybe it wasn't quite as explicit in the film, but like bringing my own experience into like the challenge of that American dream, I think
Right.
is what I brought and what I took away from the film. I think.
Right. Well, listen to the music episode if you want to hear how the score. I actually go the deepest into analyzing the Brutalist score because it made me like the film better, including what I pick out as the American Dream aspect of it. Yeah.
Oh, the score is amazing. The score, by far the score. Like I had a friend on my podcast talk about it. Like the things that definitely brought this above everything else with the score, the cinematography, and Adrian Brody.
Ooh,
I think.
we're going to talk about the cinematography, but I don't know if I agree there.
Okay,
um,
we'll tee that up for
yeah, well,
later. All right.
we'll get to that. That's gonna be our last one. Any more thought? Well, okay. I just want to shout out that I think that A Real Pain is one of the most under-nominated films this year. Did get a couple nominations, but I would have liked to have seen, amongst other things, Jesse Eisenberg here for actor and as director as well.
Timothée Chalamet should have been nominated for Dune.
Yeah, all right. I'm with you. This is a Dune Stan podcast. So
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
all right, yeah. I know John from the Lorehounds will disagree with you, but I'm with you. Best Supporting Actor. So our nominees are Yura Borisov, who plays Igor in Anora, Kieran Culkin, who plays Benjamin Benji Kaplan in A Real Pain, Edward Norton, who plays Pete Seeger in A Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce plays Harrison Lee Van Buren Sr. in The Brutalist, and Jeremy Strong plays Roy Cohn in The Apprentice. Overall thoughts in this category?
Yeah, I mean, this is also a really strong category. I mean, I think there was a lot of competition going in here. Just to shout out some other folks that could have gotten nominated. There's a lot. Denzel Washington from Gladiator 2, best part of that film. Jonathan Bailey from Wicked. Maybe I don't know if he necessarily got deserved nomination, but he definitely gave it his all and was definitely like a standout hit from The Wicked. Mark Edelstein, also from Anora. Different role than Yuri Borisov for Igor, but Edelstein plays like the Russian fuckboy just perfectly, right? Let's see, Austin Butler, Javier Bardem, also from Dune 2. I think were
Right.
big misses here.
Yeah, I was gunning for Austin Butler. Also, my mom's a fan, and she's still bitter about him losing.
Yeah.
I said that in the voicemail for your podcast. She's bitter about him losing to Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, I mean Javier Bardem though. Javier Bardem's portrayal of someone just falling to like fanaticism is also just like masterful
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. No, both deserve. Yeah.
Drew Starkey from Queer also could have been nominated here, and then Chris Hemsworth in Furiosa was also just like a scenery chewing supporting actor role. I think that definitely was worth.
And I shouted out Adam Pearson from A Different Man
Right,
also.
of course. Yeah, I didn't have that in mind because I hadn't seen A Different Man at the time. But yeah, also very worthy. Oh, and of course Macklin also from Sing Sing.
Right. Yeah. So Clarence Macklin is, I mentioned this in the writing episode, but he was also, involved in the writing side, because he's one of the members of the cast who was previously incarcerated and participated in this program that the Sing Sing film is about, this theater program in the Sing Sing prison. And he just really, like, you would not believe that he was not previously a professional actor. He just really brings.
I mean, technically, they have a lot of experience, right? So
right. They were acting. Yeah, that's all about how they were acting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about all these films in previous categories, and 3 of these are Best Picture noms. Again, I'm just going to say Real Pain should be a Best Picture nom. Kieran Culkin is the favorite to win in this category. Do you think he should be?
So that comes down to whether or not you think that he is actually a co-lead performance and it's category fraud. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But then again, that I feel like that's the case every year with so many things.
I mean, we're going to talk about that with Zoe Saldana. So
yeah, exactly. So I mean, that aside, right? Like if you think that someone who's a co-lead should not win supporting actor, then the answer is no. But given what we've got and who gives like the best performance of these in here, I'm just trying to think through it. I think Culkin is. I mean, he is a little bit of a bias just because he's like the most magnetic performance, right? Like he just does a lot. And I haven't watched Succession. I can't really say what. Like I know people are saying, oh, this is basically his character from Succession, just done again, basically. But I mean, I think it's a good performance, and I think it is a. I think like having finally seen Roy Cohn, like Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn. I think all these performances are really good, right? This is not, there's no weak performance here. That is like a step below. So I would not be upset if he doesn't win, but I also wouldn't be upset if he does win, right? Looking at some stats, I mean, I think he's pretty much locked to win. There is one stat that is, the one that's most in support of this is like if you look at people who like actors who were nominated in supporting actor and won the trifecta, right? So swept the New York, LA, and National Society of Film Critics, those three awards. People supporting actors who won all three all got nominated, and four out of five of them, Christopher Waltz in 2009, J.K. Simmons in 2014, Marsala Ali in 2016, and Ki Hui Kwan in 2022. All of them won after sweeping the trifecta, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And Kieran Culkin did this, so that kind of
Mm-hmm.
sets him up there. The one knock against him might be that for supporting actor, 14 out of 15 winning actors were from Best Picture nominees, which A
Mm-hmm.
Real Pain is not, which you said, as you said, you think it should be.
Yeah.
So that the fact that he's not in the Best Picture nominee is like working against him. That said, someone in the comments did point out, hey, there is like at least one nomination, one winner every year from the acting categories who is not from a Best Picture category.
Mm.
And given that, looking at who's the favorite this year, like Moore for actress, Brody for actor, and Soldani for supporting actress, all of those are Best Picture nominated films.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a category that's going to have a non-Best Picture nominated film, it's most likely going to be here with Kieran Culkin. So I think he's definitely the favorite to win. I mean, the other part of it, like we mentioned with speeches, is that these speeches, part of it is that you want people to come and give speeches at your events that are really fun and
Mm-hmm.
engaging, right? That's I think part of the reason why Ki Hui Kwan,
He gives wild speeches.
and that's part of why Ki Hui Kwan did, because people just
Yeah.
loved hearing him talk at campaign at awards. So having him give speeches at the event is like, again, something else that's going to make Culkin I think like a favorite to win. I think.
Yeah. If there were a potential upset, who do you think it would be?
I think that Edward Norton is a sneaky potential nominee. He's also a kind of like a longtime actor who's been in the industry. People respect him a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I think, and I think he, kind of to a lesser degree, but he also does the same things that Salome does. He also does his own performances as well. And I think
Mm-hmm.
part of it is the role specifically in the current political climate of somebody, right? Pete Seeger, famously was a folk singer who was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like attacked during the Red Scare by McCarthy,
Mm-hmm.
contempt of court for not giving over names of other. This is all in the film. Also,
Yeah. Yeah. Super nice guy. Yeah.
he took a stand for what he believed in. He was an activist throughout his entire life. So, kind of like Edward Norton portraying that kind of character in this political climate, I think, and also, again, also having the factor of being kind of like a longtime favorite of the Academy, I
Right.
think is something that is working in his favor here. I
Right.
think Borisov is a little bit new, and unfortunately, there's like a little bit of controversy with him over
Wait,
the
why is
war
there
in Ukraine.
controversy with him?
War in Ukraine. He's
Oh.
Russian, so that kind of stuff.
Oh, but that
Uh,
doesn't mean he supports. I know lots of Russians who, yeah,
well, no,
that
like he's
doesn't
he's
just.
he's 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 said stuff
Oh,
about
has he?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
shit.
So that's
Hmm.
that's 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 the thing against him there. Well, he's like appeared in propaganda. Guy Pearce, I think, could be an interesting one. But he's also, I think, the Brutalist is losing a little bit of steam. So I think
Mm-hmm.
his best chance to have won would have been if the Brutalist was to sweep. And I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And then, yeah, I think Jeremy Strong, I think Roy Cohn would have been it would be interesting one to win. But I don't know. Again, I think this is one of the cases where you nominate, you respect, but you vote for what you love, right? It's kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
mantra for a lot of Oscar voters. So I think they respect Jeremy Strong here, but I don't think they love his support. Like they love the performance, I think.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, Borisov, indeed, he's just happy to be here. I do think he was great in Honora, and I have in my notes. I hope he doesn't disappear after this. He was the previous film that some, the more nerdy film fans might have seen him in is Compartment Number 6.
I've been meaning to watch that one actually. So
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, unless I mean, yeah, I just did a quick Google and it says, yeah, indeed, that he has not condemned the war in Ukraine. He's definitely okay. Norton, he's the only one with previous nominations for Primal Fear, Birdman, and Lead in American History X. So I see what you mean. Like it could be that he's overdue to a certain extent. I do think the two most talked about performances are the two Succession boys. So Culkin, we already talked about. I do think that he is one who is a talented actor, but a talented at playing one type of character. But within that character, he can do the nuances of different situations. But he's not like a transformative actor in the same way that Jeremy Strong is. But then Jeremy Strong, I feel like and this shouldn't be important, but it kind of is. He's not as likable off screen.
Yeah, like
But
difficult to work with, kind of thing.
yeah, it just also
That's
like
the other thing,
we
right?
don't
Like,
want to see his speech. We don't care
yeah,
about his
the
speech.
other thing is like the Academy is also like it's people in the industry. So like if you're
Right.
kind of unlikable, then like it can be a little bit harder to get there, right?
Right. But I do think that his storyline and portrayal is the best thing about the Apprentice. I think that Roy Cohn, they again like they don't shy away in that case from the fact that he's a bastard, but that doesn't. I still left feeling a bit sorry for him, which is the most amazing thing that film did.
It's an effective film if it's able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think it's going to be Culkin. I don't even know who I would be rooting for. I mean, I think if I'm perfectly honest, I just really like a real pain, and I really like a Nora, and that might be biasing my picks in this category.
Yeah, I mean, I like Benz. I did a review on Convo Zoom Pod for Dakota about the real pain from. I watched it also at the New York Film Festival, and there I wrote like he does like a really he does a really great performance, like in just capturing that vibe of somebody who I know other folks who have like have a kind of mental illness, right? I have like my own
Mhm.
demons that I work with,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like he really effectively captures that kind of like someone who has that kind of like mental state, I think, very well, where
Yeah.
it's like you do all of it's a very layered performance as well, right? Like
Right.
obviously he's high and he's low, but there's also like an element of like he's performative in front of his cousin to some degree as well, right? Which I
Right.
think there's a lot going on there.
Which, okay, here's my hot take. I think he does a great job, but I think the primary credit for him doing a great job goes to Jesse Eisenberg, who again was not only his co-star, but more importantly in this case, the director and writer.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the
and
film would not have worked without either of them, right? You need
Right.
both of
No,
them.
he was the perfect one for this. But it is funny. I was listening to interviews with Jesse Eisenberg, and he was saying about working with Kieran Culkin. He was like, he was the perfect person for this character, but working with him was a little bit stressful because he would show up and he wouldn't even know what scene they were filming that day. But then Jesse Eisenberg would be like, "Oh, it's this one," and he'd be like, "Oh yeah. Let me just take a quick look. Yep, got it all memorized," and then just go.
I mean, to be fair, that kind of feels like Benji if you think
Yeah,
about it, like in
exactly.
real
Yeah,
life. Oh,
exactly.
also somebody who I completely forgot about. I literally just watched this last night. Also, who could have been in this category? Willem Dafoe in
Oh.
Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'll honestly Willem Dafoe should just get nominated like every
Yeah.
year.
I mean,
Honestly.
Nosferatu should have gotten it got 4 nominations, but it should have gotten some acting love.
Oh, I forgot Lily Rose Depp, an actress.
Yeah,
Sorry,
for
going back,
actress. Yeah,
would have been
exactly.
great for there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more love for Nosferatu. But hey, I'm happy that we've got 9 horror nominations this year. So,
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Again, this is another category, much like acting, right? Where
mm-hmm.
there is no bad nominees here, right? So,
Right.
and honestly, like with the way things are looking for Culkin, he's probably going to get the Oscar. So at this point, he's also on. He's also actually going to be on Broadway soon for Glenn Glary, Glenn Ross.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of up for potentially getting a Tony Award as well for that.
Okay.
So at this point, all
All
he
right.
needs to do is just release an audiobook, and then he'll get an
Yeah.
EGOT.
Yeah, the audiobook is a secret pathway to the EGOT.
Exactly.
All right. Well, moving on to the last acting category, Best Supporting Actress. So the nominees here are Monica Barbaro as Joanne Baez in A Complete Unknown, Ariana Grande as Glinda Upland in Wicked, Felicity Jones as Erzsébet Toth in The Brutalist, Isabella Rossellini as Sister Agnes in Conclave, and Zoe Saldana as Rita Mora Castro in Emilia Perez. So overall thoughts in this category. We've already said, of course, Saldana is the favorite to win. However, we feel
Yeah.
about the movie
I
otherwise.
mean, I think frankly, she is the best part in the film,
Hmm.
and
For sure.
if anything,
She's
the
the
narrative
lead of the film, though.
she
She
is
has
the
the
lead of the
most
film.
screen
Yeah,
time. It's through her
yeah.
perspective. Yeah.
Again, that is that. I mean, it is kind of. I can see the argument in the same way that last was it last year for Killers of the Flower Moon that year.
Yeah, that was last
Or
year.
like, oh, Lily Gladstone should not be the lead because he doesn't have the most screen time or whatever. But like,
Hmm.
she's the beating heart of the film. In the
Mm.
same way, the film is technically about Emilia Perez's like Gascon's character. So I get that a lot.
But that's it. In both cases, they're the subject of the film. It's not from their perspective.
Yeah, again, it is a that's a tricky one to write. Again, I'm not going to try to educate who should and who's not be in
Right,
like
right.
in category fraud, because again, part of what I do like that is like, sir, this like category fraud, but I deal with the cards I'm dealt in terms of numbers, right?
Yeah,
And it is like she's basically swept every major category. The only one really putting up who could potentially put up a fight would be Ariana Grande and Wicked.
yeah.
And I think it has kind of the effect of like, oh, she totally has another film coming out. We'll just nominate her again next year, and maybe she has
Mm,
a chance to win then, right?
yeah.
So
I'm rooting for Ariana Grande. I just think that she just absolutely nailed this character, and I think people underestimate comedy all the time, but in order to have that sort of comedic timing and to nail the gestures and the personality and to come across as both warm-hearted and a bitch at the same time, she just really nailed the complexities of
yeah,
this character in emoting and in mannerisms
yeah.
and the singing and all that stuff,
I
of
mean,
course.
Grande is I had forgotten she was a theater kid before she was a musical star.
Mm,
So, totally makes sense why she did as well as she did. I will say I do have a little bit of a bias against her just for various off screen various nonsenses. The whole
about her
thing with
love life.
well, not even that. Just like how she kind of is like a racial chameleon over the years, and like assume
Okay.
like essentially right like sometimes they'll present more like right now she's very presenting as very white right now, right? But there was
Uh-huh.
definitely a period where she presented as a little bit like kind of like in her racial ambiguity, like darkened herself a little bit more,
What you
and
mean,
had
like
like
tanning?
not just tanning, right? But also like the way she talked,
Mm,
like the accents she was using, and then there was a period where she like adopted like a more Asian-ish persona, right? So that kind of thing kind of gives me a little bit of a squick. But if you put aside the off-screen stuff, right? As which if you did which for most people here, there's going to be some sort of controversy at some
right.
degree, right? I will agree.
I mean,
Grande
Zoe
definitely.
Saldana's had similar
Yeah,
criticisms.
exactly. So no one here is perfect, though. Some people are definitely much less perfect than others. Gascon.
Hmm.
That aside, I think Grande definitely is. I think the best true supporting performance, shall we say, in this category. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think though that Monica Barbaro is the best part of A Complete Unknown. Felicity Jones is the best part for me of The Brutalist, and Isabella Rossellini steals the show with a curtsy in Conclave. So
I know, right? So, yeah. I mean, again, no bad nominations here. I think like no bad performances here, rather. So everything I think
hmm
is like again a worthy nomination. Looking back, right, at some people who could have been nominated, Rebecca Ferguson, Dune 2, once again.
hmm
Tilda Swinton, Room Next Door, again. I really enjoyed that one. Margaret Qualley, in The Substance.
right.
I did not
She
expect her to be
deserved it.
as amazing as she was, but she
Yeah.
definitely brought it. And then shout out to my long forgotten Joan Chen in Didi.
Oh,
Definitely love that one, and really wish she could have gotten a nomination there, but
yeah.
it is what it is. Oh, and also people were saying, Jamie Lee Curtis in The Last Showgirl. I haven't seen it yet, but
Mm,
I know that was also up in the air for potential nomination as
yeah.
well.
And you know what other film, just for both of the female acting categories, Love Lies Bleeding. That was
Yeah,
released early in the year and people kind of forgot about it, but that was a
yeah, I
great
haven't seen
film.
that one, but I mean, Kristen Stewart's definitely had like an interesting career post Twilight for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that felt like the role where she was most herself and could
Mhm.
most like unleash there. Um, and yeah, I just want to say again, Margaret Qualley for The
Yeah.
Substance absolutely should be on this list.
Yeah, I definitely though that says he probably would have knocked off Monica Barbaro, just by the
Yeah,
way that things were looking. And I am not upset with the Joan Baez like the Joan
no,
Baez performance, especially like
she was great.
again, she also did her own performances, which is also really impressive on a technical level. A lot of musical performances this year actually.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Felicity Jones, from The Brutalist, she's the only one who's had a previous nomination, which she gotten for The Theory of Everything in 2014. All the others are first-time noms again, so a lot of first-time acting noms this year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts on the acting before we move on to directing?
Overall acting again. One person aside, I am completely happy with I think everyone's nomination here, and honestly would like obviously they're the favorites to win, but I think you could make an argument any individual here is actually very worthy of winning the
Right.
Oscar.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I cannot believe Isabella Rossellini has never been nominated before.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Okay, best director. So we have two categories left: best director, and then I included best cinematography here, which could be under technical, but I think it's a very director category. So,
Mm.
but starting with best director, the nominees are Jacques Audiard for Emilia Perez, Sean Baker for Honora, Brady Corbet for The Brutalist, Coralie Fargier for The Substance, and James Mangold for A Complete Unknown. And what are your overall thoughts on this crop
Yeah.
of
One
directors?
thing that actually stands out is looking at them now. Did James Mangold co-write A Complete Unknown, or did someone else write it for him?
Um, I think did he co-wrote it? I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a co-writer. So that's yeah. I was gonna say all five of these are actually or director screenwriters actually, right? Which I think is important because it really shows their um like how much creative vision that they had, right? Both in like the story as well as obviously like all the direct choices that went on in here, right? But yeah, I think they're all like really great visionaries, right? I think of these, I think James Mangold was a bit of a surprise nomination day, right? I think people were really expecting Edward Berger, who nominated Conclave, to
Mhm.
be in here, which again I definitely would not have been upset by. Again, really loved Conclave overall as a film. Um, I personally was rooting for Ramal Ross to get in for Nickel Boys. I think he honestly had the best direction of the year in my opinion in Nickel Boys, but a little bit new, like a little bit newcomer, a little bit experimental, I think. So that might have earned there. Denis Villeneuve for
Yeah.
everything he did with Dune, definitely snubbed here. Hopefully they're able to pull off the Lord of the Rings sweep whenever Messiah comes out.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that that the thing was copium.
Yeah. Too underrepresented.
Yeah. And then, but yeah, I think overall, so just walking through them, Audiard, I think probably the one I'm least happy with here, right?
Mhm.
Again, a lot of that is probably his like off screen comments and so on is playing a factor
Mhm.
in there. But even
Mhm.
then, right, just kind of
See
like
our controversy episode for more on
yeah,
that.
but even then, a lot of how a lot of those comments kind of translate to like the things that were done on the film, right? Like, okay, sure,
Mhm.
they saw it in France. I'm not too upset by that, just
No.
because, hey, there's tax credits. You
Sure.
can make the film cheaper. The film wouldn't exist without shooting in France. Sure, I can buy that,
Sure.
right? But stuff like, oh, I visited Mexico like 3 or 4 times, but didn't really do as much research, right?
Mhm.
I chose to have the screenplay written in French and translated to Spanish, right?
Mm.
Like that, and then like just like the research that needed to be done to go um, into like just properly portraying Mexico, making it not be like a stereotype type um of being like all cartel driven, and that like everyone's either in the cartel or have somebody who was killed by like the cartel, right? Like there's like it reminds me of there was a film I saw at the film festival, New York Film Festival, called Grand Tour by Miguel Gomez, which I believe is like a Portuguese director. And it
Mhm.
kind of is the way they did that film is that they essentially, oh, we did a quick tour around Asia, shot some
Mhm.
footage, and then we went back to Portugal and saw it on a soundstage, the plot, and interspersed footage from our tour around Asia to
Mhm.
give this impression of what it's like to be in Asia. That feels kind of exploitative, like voyeuristic
Mm.
almost, right? Where it's like you're not really immersing yourself within the subject. Like it's not a very earnest film in that way. It's almost like a voyeuristic, almost mocking film where you make a caricature of what your impression of a place is. Again, this is kind of me starting to ramble about Amelia
Mhm.
Perez and its problems, but
Mhm.
it comes back to the direction, right? Where it's like, okay, that's
Mhm.
your choice on like how to put together this film. It just doesn't feel earnest or authentic, and I think those are
Mhm.
the films that I think are truly truly great, right?
Right.
As a contrast to that, right, Sean Baker, right? This is my
Mhm.
first Sean Baker film. I actually haven't seen his other films yet, which I know I
Okay.
really need to go back to watch. But from what I know, right, like he really immersed himself in
And that's
writing,
the Honora director.
researching
Yeah.
Anora in like the sex work industry within New York,
Mhm.
the
Yes.
Russian
Yeah.
community within here in New York, with I always love seeing New York on film, especially like these little corners that I haven't really explored as much myself. So like that immersion and authenticity and affection for the subject matter, I think,
Mhm.
is something that really shines through in his portrayal of Honora, which I think is why he's leaped to be at least I would say the outright front runner, but definitely one of the two front runners I think in this category, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brady Corbet, right? Similar thing, right? He
The
lived,
Brutalist. Yeah.
breathed, completely lived the Brutalist like for 7 years trying to get this film made, basically, right? And again, I think the direction, like budget, obviously that's like a bit producing as well, but the fact that he's a director and he has to make these choices based around budget to keep costs low, and he was able to pull off as effective a film like with that, like to maintain his vision and pull it off on that budget. It's kind of like what Villeneuve does, but on a smaller scale, basically, right?
Mm.
Like Villeneuve, right? And why he should be here is that he has that vision. He pulled it off. He has a bigger budget, but still, he's able to pull it off effectively when it could have cost much more anyway, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Farze, I think the substance. I think I see it as more a bit of a more of a screenwriting accomplishment
Mm.
than a directing per se. I mean, obviously the directing
Hmm.
is in there for sure, but I think if you have you read the screenplay for the substance yet?
No.
So if you read it, she actually puts in like all of these like onomatopoeia and like the sound effects
Oh,
and like
cool.
describing everything. Like it's a very non-traditional screenplay in that way. And so I think that's where the accomplishment, I think, for the substance. Obviously, it's her translating her vision from page to screen. So the directing is there. But I think if I had to weigh which one is the more effective between all of these screenplay writers, I would put Farze
Mm-hmm.
more on the writing side than the directing side. Whereas everybody else is, I feel, more like a directing side. And then James Mangold, right? I think he is the only non first time director nominated here.
Right.
So in that sense, he is kind of like, again, similar to, I think that's everything with A Complete Unknown, right? That's the vibe of Complete Unknown. It's very old Hollywood in that regard, right? It's the older Academy members. They love Bob Dylan. They know these folks, but they also love James Mangold, who's a longtime director, right? Logan, Ford versus
But
Ferrari.
he's never been nominated for director. His films keep getting nominated, and he was nominated for the Logan
Right. So, but that's
screenplay.
the thing, right?
But
he's done so much. He's respected
yeah,
within the
yeah,
industry, right? I think that's where this comes in.
he's a well-known name. I find him personally hit or miss. Like I love some of his movies, and some of his other
Yeah.
movies I'm like, meh, kind of middle of the road, which is kind of how I feel about this.
Yeah. I won't say he's the greatest director out there, but he
Mm-hmm.
definitely is he's the definition of a workhorse director, I think, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
definitely does get things done. And unlike other kind of like directors for hire, right? Like say people who like Madam Web or like the other like Sony Marvel films, they
Mm-hmm.
just hire somebody just to get it over the finish line. Like he
Mm-hmm.
still has a vision and has a
Right.
style, I think, even though he like to some degree he does kind of get looped into like these like big studio,
Yeah.
vehicle
Indiana
projects.
Jones and the Dial of
Exactly,
Destiny.
right? Like he yeah, yeah, but again, he's very effective at getting these
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
big things going on, and I think that's in the same way that right, Edward Norton, right, kind of like for Pete Seeger and a supporting actor, is kind of like a well-known name that's like getting his due now, right? I think James Mangold is kind of like in the same place here. So oddly art aside, I think the other four, I think, are all worthy winners to some degree.
Mm.
Though I would say it's probably right now between Baker and Corbet. Though Farze winning would be definitely inspired, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just say that I'm most upset about Villeneuve for
Of
Dune
course,
and Robert Eggers for
but yeah,
Nosferatu, about them not being on here because they are just both such auteurs in the full sense of the word, where they just
mhm,
they have the
mhm,
vision and they can realize it in ways that others don't seem to be able to. They're geniuses when it comes to film, for sure.
right, right.
Um, so I'm upset about the two of them not being on here, but given who is on here, yeah, Odiard, he's actually has so there's 13 nominations for Amelia Perez this year. He has 4 personally for Best Picture, Director, Screenplay, and he also wrote some of the lyrics for the song El Mal, which is why I said I think the lyrics seem really simplistic. And then his previous only nomination was for a foreign language nod for A Prophet in 2009. But he's a well-respected director in the sense like other films like Rust and Bone and stuff have gotten a lot of
Kind of like Mangold, right?
well, yeah,
Kind of,
he's like Mangold, but the thing is, I actually tend to watch James Mangold films, and that just is probably,
yeah,
James Mangold does obviously do a lot of superhero stuff, things like that. Whereas Odiard I was aware of him, but I don't think I've ever actually watched one of his films. Like it was one of like the
mm,
Sisters Brothers. I was like, oh, I should watch that, and then I just never did. So I can't really compare him to past work the way I can with Mangold. But yeah, for me, I don't think this is the one for either of them. And Odiard, I'm just kind of not feeling warmly toward him in general.
Yeah.
Fargier, this is only her second feature overall, we should say. So she did this 2017 film Revenge, which is a French film. And then she's done shorts online, like I mentioned in the writing episode. Watch Reality Plus. I linked that there in the show notes. It's a short she did that tackles a lot of the same ideas that the substance is going for. And I mean, I think she's not going to win, but I'm really glad to see her here. As she kind of came almost out of nowhere, and now people are going to be paying attention to what she does next. So I can't wait to see it. Um, and I think, yeah, the two favorites to win are definitely Sean Baker, who is my favorite to win out of these. Who's previously more of a Spirits Awards darling. We talked about him more in the writing episode 2, but he is known for. I mean, I guess I said a Florida Project. The Florida Project would be his other most
Red
beloved.
Rocket.
Red Rocket. I was talking with Mark from the Academy of Death Racers. That's his favorite Baker film, and it's my least favorite Baker film. So take from that what you
Fair
will.
enough.
Um, yeah, so I would love to see him win. And then the other one is Corbet, and according to Gold Derby, Corbet's currently in second place. A lot of the time, for a while during this season, people thought that Corbet was the one to beat. The awards have kind of gone between those two. He actually started as an actor in movies like 13, Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. He was in the series 24. But his previous film was Vox Lux from 2018. Did you watch Vox
I
Lux?
haven't yet. No.
It's a hugely different film from The Brutalist, so it is like a surprising turn of. And I think he has interesting ideas, and but I'm going to say here's a hot take. A lot of people are going to disagree with, but for me, the directing was my least favorite part of the film.
Like what about the directing specifically didn't you like?
I think, first of all, I think that everyone who's in this film, I think the cast is great, but I've seen them give better performances in across the board. I do not think it was the best performance of the career of any of the actors in this film, and I just think that the way he a lot of this also has to do with I don't like the script, and I think the script is just unwieldy and clunky and doesn't never feels natural. So the interactions between the different characters never felt natural to me, and I think a lot of that does come into the directing, and also how he would have the cinematographer. Yeah, we're gonna get to cinematography next, but hold the shots too long. And I'm saying I'm coming from someone I'm a Yorgos Lanthimos fan, from. Oscar fans will know him from last year, but most of his films are known for like stilted, awkward, behavior. And I appreciate that. But in this case, it just did not work for me at all. Just every single take. I never forgot for a second that I was watching a film. I never became fully immersed in it. And I think that the directing is most to blame.
Yeah. I will disagree. I definitely did
Mm-hmm.
lose myself in the film. And I think it maybe comes down to personal taste, right? I think the acting I could see, right, tensely, right? I can't say I've seen a lot of everyone's um uh everyone's like filmography aside from
Mm-hmm.
Adrian Brody and Wes Anderson films who are even more stilted.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's
But
a good
I think he's
comparison
better
point.
in those. Yeah.
Yeah, but that said, um for me it's the technical stuff, right? For me, I'm very much like, I don't know, maybe this is like the film hipster in me, but I definitely
Mm-hmm.
enjoy looking at the technical below the line stuff
Sure.
more,
Yeah,
like the
me
tech
too.
stuff more so than the above the line stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel a lot of the technical stuff was really on point here, right? Maybe you disagree with the cinematography. I personally love the cinematography and like the shot
Mm-hmm.
composition, and so on, right? The lingering on the shots, I think, is a little bit more of an editing thing than the cinematography thing, perhaps.
Right, but it comes from the director too, and I
True,
just think
true.
that just the way,
Mm.
just the overall vision for me
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
just a
I
clunk,
think for
clunk,
me,
clunk.
I wanted to come in like I loved how long Oppenheimer was, right? And it's like sitting in there, and I think like for me, just going in, I loved Oppenheimer, I love
Mm-hmm.
Babylon, I love What was the other really long one? Megalopolis of all things.
I still haven't watched
Um,
that.
but like these like long, epic-ish films
Hmm.
are very much to my taste. I watched Lawrence of Arabia for the first time like
I
last
love that
year,
one.
right? So like these like long epic films, I think I just love that tradition of film, and I think
Sure.
like Corbett is attempting to strike that. Maybe
Hmm.
for you it didn't quite hit for me, but for me it did. So
Okay.
no one's objectively correct or incorrect. Obviously, comes
No,
down to
no.
taste.
I think more people
Um,
agree with you than me.
yeah,
So
but
for
yeah,
what that's
that's
worth.
definitely I think why I like the directing. Right now, I just looked up the numbers. I haven't updated my model after the BAFTAs, but for a while, right, Corbet was holding on to a lead across the
Hmm.
three sites. Like, yes, Baker did take the lead in Gold Derby, but Next Best Picture and Awards Expert had Corbet leading in directing still, so I still had him at number one. I just
Hmm.
checked. Next Best Picture has switched Baker to be the lead, so now it's 2-1 for number ones for Baker. So now he's definitely the favorite to win. Though still a slight margin, awards expert still has Brutalist as number one.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It's definitely going to come down to the wire, I think, between the two.
Yeah. I just think that Sean Baker just has such a skill of, this is one of the first films that where he doesn't work primarily with non-professional actors, and I just think that his ability to bring these performances out of, and in this case, I have to credit Mikey Madison and the rest of the cast that they brought their own stuff to the table and did a phenomenal job. But I just think the way that he can lace together this entire story visually, and of course he's involved in the writing and everything too. But
He's also an editor, right?
yeah, so apparently the way that he does this is he'll do like a full scene and edit it and complete it and before moving on to the next.
Okay.
So it's a very unusual process to do things that way. But I just think he is the way he's able to work with his cast and bring the best out of them. For me, I'm glad to see him recognized here, and I would love to see him
I could
win.
definitely see him be the actor's director for sure. And maybe that's why
Yeah.
he's kind of like in the lead. Obviously, the acting branch is the largest branch of the Academy. So if they see, oh, that's a director who can get the best out of his acting cast, that might
Hmm.
be why he has like the edge, right? As opposed to Corbet, who's like the director who can get the most on the technical production side of things done. Because admittedly, I think Honora has like a little bit less in terms of like that
Sure.
element. Not nothing, obviously, but still a little bit
Hmm.
less, right? So I think it comes down to what you're looking for in a director, I think.
Yeah, if you watch his prior films, Sean Baker's prior films to Honora, then you can see it's a huge leap in terms of the technical side over his prior films. But indeed, if you put it next to, I honestly I think on the technical side, out of this list of five
Honestly,
films we
all
just
of them
talked
I think
about,
are stronger than Baker, I think, in
well, yeah, I would
technical.
give it to the substance, but yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah,
on the
too.
technical.
The most technical. Yeah,
Hmm.
I can see that. I could definitely see an argument for that for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's some other names, right? We already mentioned Villeneuve as like not
Hmm.
getting the love he deserves.
Yeah.
Um, I will say I think also Pyle Kapadia from All We Imagine Is Light completely
Mm.
snubbed this Oscar season. Loved her film. I'm definitely a sucker for like these kind of like films that just capture the vibe of a city, and he I think captures
Mm.
Mumbai so well. Mohammed Rasuluf for Seed of the Sacred Fig.
Yes.
Obviously, he's got nominated for international feature. Probably won't win, unfortunately, but loved his direction choices here, especially given that obviously there's the danger to his life thing and potentially being
Hmm.
imprisoned for this film. But
Yeah.
on top of that, he actually could
We
not
talked about
direct.
that in the writing
Yeah,
episode if you want to hear more.
he could not be on set when he was directing, which is crazy,
Mhm.
right? That's just
Mhm.
astounds me. And then yeah, Eggers and those Ferraro as well. And then some other first time directors to mention. Kapadia is actually a first time feature director, which is impressive. Ramel Ross, who I mentioned for Nickelboy, is also a first time feature director. He was nominated for our Hale County This Morning This Evening, I think, for documentary a couple years ago. I think like his first person choice was impressive. And then to a lesser degree, I think Son Wang for Didi, I think is a very small,
Mm.
intimate film, but love kind of like that intimacy, and kind of like capturing that early 2000s vibe in his directing choices. And then Dev Patel and Monkey Man as a director, I think was also I think
Yes.
he has a great directing career in front of him. I think.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up Monkey Man. That was one of my favorite films this year. And there is a deep dive in the Lorehounds feed for anyone who wants to know more about Monkey Man, because I went in deep on exactly all the challenges that he filmed during COVID, and it was just like a shit show. This film shoot, and the
Cameras
fact that
breaking,
yeah, he broke
injuries.
his hand. Yeah. Oh man. And you know the whole quarantine thing. People had to come quarantine on this small
Yeah.
island in Indonesia for 2 weeks, and the way he got people to come, like he deserves. I cannot wait to see where Dev Patel's directing. Obviously, love him as an actor. Can't wait to see more of him directing now.
And like the fact that like the film almost got just dumped on Netflix, and it even might have been buried on like not even come out on Netflix just because of like the anti Modi sentiments within the film.
Yeah.
And then that Jordan Peele comes in and saves the film and gives it like the big screen release it deserved. Like that's also a great story there as
Right.
well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rich Pepiat, who he's the director of Kneecap, and people have listened to other episodes. I keep bringing up Kneecap, the Irish submission, as much as possible, and I think everyone should watch it. It's on Netflix. And another one who was never in a million years going to be was going to be nominated, but I hope in the future he will be. A French director, Adrien Beau, and he directed The Vordelak, which is like a Nosferatu esque
Mhm.
story based on a Tolstoy, not that Tolstoy, his cousin's short story or novella from the 19th century, and just his vision of the way he brings all the different aspects together. And he also likes to use, like, he uses a puppet for the vampire in that one, and it just works. It just works
That is
perfectly.
insane, and I've never heard of this film.
Oh, you have to watch it, The
Yeah.
Vordelok. So yeah, no, almost nobody's heard of it. Um, but I think Adrian Beau, after watching this film, I went back and I read the novella in English. I read the novella in French. I watched the two previous adaptations of the novella, and then I watched all of the short films in his catalog because this was his first feature. And I love Adrian Beau now. I want cannot wait to see what he does next. Yeah.
Also, shout out to two musicals this year we haven't mentioned yet. Well, we have mentioned them or one of them.
Oh,
John
Better
M.
Man.
Two.
Oh,
Well, yes,
sorry.
Better Man's one of them. So yes, Better Man. I mean, the choice is there, especially like I could talk forever about the visual effects. That's not this episode.
Better Man should have been one of the films of the year.
Yeah, no,
It's a Robbie
it is one of
Williams
my.
biopic
Yeah.
where he's a monkey, but trust me, he needs to be a monkey, and it's so good. It's one of the best films of the year.
If you're interested, go watch Core the Digital. They have a series called Breaking Down Visual Effects, like good
Hmm.
and bad visual effects. So they talk with the visual effects directors from Weta, right, who did the visual effects for Better Man, and just like the small things you don't actually realize are incredibly insane visual
Right,
effects. Like the scene
like shaping the head.
where he's shaving
Yeah.
his head in the mirror, that's like insane.
Hmm.
Or like filming on Regent Street
Yeah.
in London, and then they had to
Yeah.
like put it off for 5 months because the Queen died right before they were supposed to film.
Right.
It's a whole thing. Anyway, he did the Greatest
But actually, I
Showman.
just want to interject that
Yeah.
listeners, the tech episode will be out before this, so there is a link in the tech episode show notes to that video that Paula's talking about right now.
Oh yeah, love that one. And I mean, yeah, listen to the Directors Guild of America Directors Cut podcast about Better Man. Also, that's like
Yeah.
a great behind the
Or
scenes
I
story.
think I called the tech episode, sorry, the visual and editing episode. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and
yeah.
then what else? Oh, and yeah, he did the Greatest Showman. Like I would trust this guy with whatever musical he
Hmm.
wants to do in the
Hmm.
future.
Hmm.
Similarly, right? I know not a lot of people love John M. They think he's a little corny sometimes. I've always had a soft spot for John M.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, partly because like of his background working with dancers. Like
Hmm.
if like he has this little scene web series called Legion of Extraordinary Dancers. That's basically like the Justice League, but everyone's a dancer, basically.
Hmm.
And I mean, I grew up like I really enjoyed like watching America's Best Dance Crew and all of these like street dancers, and like he worked with them really well. I mean, he ended up taking over the Step Up series for a long time. He works with dancers and choreography really well. And I think that really translated well to Wicked here, obviously, but even like his other work in the Heights,
Hmm.
the adaptation of Lin Manuel Miranda's first Broadway play, right? So like shout out to John M. I'm sure there's a very good chance he gets nominated next year for Wicked for Good. I can believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't love In the Heights, but I certainly loved his work on Wicked.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to our final category of this episode, and that is Best Cinematography, closely related to Best Directing. And the nominees for this category are For the Brutalist, Lowell Crowley; for Dune Part 2, Grieg Fraser; for Emilia Perez, Paul Guillaume; For Maria, Edward Lockman. For Nosferatu, Yaren Blanchk. And yeah, well, a lot of Brutalist and Emilia Perez discussion throughout. Of course, these episodes we discussed Dune and Nosferatu in the tech categories, and I just shouted out those directors who should have been nominated in the previous category, and do also see the show notes for deep dives into Dune and Nosferatu, and the new film on this list. And I know
Still haven't seen it.
you started it, you said, but you haven't finished it yet. Is Maria, which is about Maria Callas, who was a famous Argentinian, right, singer,
I think she was. I know she was in, and she's an opera singer. I forget
opera
what her
singer,
ethnicity
right,
was.
right. And so it's basically about the end of her life as she's trying to train and looking back on her life and thinking about doing one last show. So what did I know you just started it, but did you have any thoughts on it so far?
I don't have any solidified thoughts yet. It looks pretty, right?
It looks
Edward
pretty.
Lockman. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the most important thing for this. That's the only nomination it got.
Right. Right.
Angelina Jolie.
Cinematography.
I've yet to see the whole film, so I'm going to reserve judgment on whether she should have gotten a nomination for actress.
Mm-hmm.
I know she was like up there for a long time. Um,
Angelina Jolie, yeah.
I mean, part of it is going back to nominations. This branch, cinematography and costume design, are both kind of not people. A lot of people realize this, but they're kind of notorious for nominating their favorites, right? So they just kind of nominate the same people over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Who have, and it's kind of hard for they will nominate newcomers, obviously, but there is also a good chance a up and coming newcomer might be overlooked in favor of nominating somebody who's a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it was Edward Lockman, right? He was nominated last year for El Conde, right?
Mm-hmm. Also with the
That,
same director, Pablo Larraín.
yeah, and I mean that's just the case of like okay,
Yeah.
clearly like they have a thing for
It's his
Lockman at
fourth.
this point.
It's Lockman's fourth nomination after Far From Heaven and Carol too. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean he was he. This is a case where that was kind of like uh, the if you were paying attention was probably going to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
I would have said I would have liked to see who's it? Conclave. I think would have had really great cinematography.
Yeah.
Would have
Uh-huh.
loved to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nickel Boys. I forget who the cinematographer there is, but like just the task of getting first person view in a film, the entire film, or
Mm-hmm.
almost entire film, to work without feeling cheesy or nauseating is inspired. And
Mm.
I think
Eh,
Nickel Boys is a film that's ahead of its time, frankly speaking.
yeah. I think Nickel Boys, he did something very interesting, and I would not have been upset to see it recognized. I do keep thinking about, what they did there with this first person cinematography, putting you in the perspective of the person, of these two characters in particular. It switches back and forth between them. And but for me, it didn't work. So I wasn't at all sad to see it not on here, because for me it just made me feel more distant from the story because I couldn't see the facial
Mm.
expressions of I just find that's just a personal thing. For as far as Maria, so this it's supposedly part of this like Pablo Larraín's quote unquote trilogy about the great women.
Iconic women. Yeah.
Yeah, so he did Jackie with where what's her face? Queen Amidala, Natalie Portman, um, played Jackie Kennedy Onassis, and then Spencer with
Kristen
uh
Stewart playing Diana.
yeah, Kristen Stewart playing Diana. And I would say of these three, Maria was my least favorite. Spencer was my favorite of those three.
Yeah,
Um,
I've only seen Spencer in its entirety at this point, so I still have to go back and see Jackie. But I mean, Kristen Stewart is again, like I said earlier, she's had a very interesting career. I am all for whatever she does, whatever next film she does.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll definitely watch Love Lies Bleeding. That was very good. Although, yeah, gore warnings and stuff for Love Lives Bleeding for those who need it. If you want to watch Maria, it's on Netflix. And again, Pablo Larraín, he's a Chilean director who is sometimes a bit controversial, and I talked about that last year in the coverage of the cinematography because that's when El Conde was nominated. So you go back and check that out if you're curious about why he's controversial. But um, I didn't love the cinematography of Maria, and this is one that I'm not. I think this place should have gone to one of these other films that we've been talking about. I just think that it was either very floaty or just punked in space in place, And it was fine. It served the film well. Like the floatiness is sort of about this dreaminess because it is about the fact that she's on these mind altering drugs that distort her reality the whole time. But I just don't think it was one of the 5 most interesting uses of the camera this year. I would have liked to have rather seen Better Man in here. Better Man did really interesting cinematography that played into the story it was telling in terms of power dynamics and things like
Yeah.
that. And also, I think the substance did that as
Oh
well.
yeah, the substance is cinematography. I forgot to mention. Like again, my notes are from before nominations, before I saw the substance.
Hmm.
That cinematography, like that fisheye look, and just like the slow panning and everything. That was inspired.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is also a category, whereas in the previous categories that we've talked about today, we list the names first. This is one where the film is listed and then the name afterwards. So, you're talking about people voting for their favorites in this category, but most people watching at home don't even know the names of these cinematographers, and they absolutely should.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I mean, for me, like the two technical categories that really should be almost considered above the line are cinematography and editing. I think
yeah.
because
Okay.
that's literally the definition of film. You
Yeah.
shoot film, and then you cut it into pieces and put it together.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so Guillaume from Emilia Perez, this was his international breakthrough, unlikely to win, and yeah, I'm perfectly
I
fine
mean,
with
there's
that.
nothing special about Emilia Perez's cinematography that I can
Yeah, it's
point
fine.
to. So
Yeah, it's fine. Um, Crawley from The Brutalist is the favorite to win. This is his third time working with Courbet, the director. He also worked with him on The Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux. And yeah, my hot take is I don't like the cinematography in this film either.
what
Just
about it don't you like?
um, I think so. What I was so I made a contrast when we did our conclave breakdown, where like the conclave they do hold the shots very long. The editor was told like leave the shots very long, but it works because the cinematographer is doing interesting things with the camera that make you. It doesn't feel like just like it doesn't feel like it's held too long. You don't even realize how long the shots are because the cinematography is just placing you in the moment with the feelings of the moment and camera moves that move with the moment. And it just feels like, for example, in The Brutalist, they use a lot of low angle shots, which they also do in the two others I shouted out just now, Better Man and The Substance. But in Better Man and The Substance, the use of the low angle shots plays into the story. In in The Brutalist, it often didn't make sense to me why they were using low angle shots with certain characters in certain moments. It seemed counter to, because usually that's something that you do, that is a discussion on the play of power and things like that. And I don't know, it just didn't work for me. It just, it was another one of the things that just repeatedly took me out of that film.
I think so. I think here Brutalist's cinematography also serves, I think, to highlight the production of the film, production design, right? So like how like because part of the film, right? Obviously, like for example, the library scene, right, where they're in there, or like the marble quarry, right, where they go to pick out the marble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those scenes specifically are have very intense, have very not necessarily complicated, but very striking visual design going to
Mm-hmm.
on in the production, right? And I think the cinematography in the film is meant to highlight that production design element to it, right? To some degree, right? Because again, as much as it is, whatever controversy there is about like the film about architects not liking it being the brutalist and all that,
Mm-hmm.
it still is at the end of the day, I think a very well production designed film. And I think like the cinematography does is what it does best is suited to capturing that element of the film. And then there are some specific character moments. I still cannot get over the sequence when his cousin kicks him out, basically. And then like the light is shining from behind him, and you don't see his cousin's face. And then it kind of goes back. You see like the light like glaring into like Adrian Brody's eyes, and cuts back, and
Mm-hmm.
like the lights coming from behind his cousin, who's like kicking him out, and kind of the darkness in there. Like
Mm-hmm.
that shot is still stuck with me to this day, right? Um, So I mean, I think there are some very striking shots. I think again here the film is more in like the cinematography and everything is more in service to the production design, like in the same way that Courbet is more technical focused design than as opposed to necessarily an acting focus, right? Because I think what you're saying is like the cinematography doesn't go do its best to highlight the acting in the
Well, yeah, not just the acting, but the story, the points of the film.
yeah.
I just feel
I mean,
that
yeah.
to me the cinematography choices feel a bit
Mhm.
haphazard, which is my
Yeah.
problem with a lot of the Brutalist.
Yeah. I think for me, I think it's vibes. Honestly, at the end
Hmm.
of the day, I
Okay.
think the vibes of the cinematography for me
Hmm.
are really well done here for me at least. Um, and then yeah, I mean, I think, and I believe, I think the other part that got this film going, I think they saw it in VistaVision, right? So I think it's the
Hmm.
specific technology that goes into the film. I think that is also
Right.
carrying the Brutalist nomination here as
No,
well.
those wide shots are great.
Yeah, I think that's the real the thing going for Brutalist overall. So I mean, I personally really like the Brutalist. Um, Looking at the others real quick, I think Dune Part Two. Obviously, we talk about Greg Fraser.
Hmm.
Like I mean, it's amazing. The cinematography is great. That said, I can also see why people would be hesitant to not to vote for this just because like we saw a lot of this in Dune, right? Um,
Mm.
at least subsurface level. I'm sure, like
Hmm.
and especially I'm sure you'd have a lot to say if you dig into like the different shots. There's a lot more to the shots in Dune Part Two than just Dune One, right?
Hmm.
And again, I also think there's like the Lord of the Rings effect of like, okay, when Messiah comes out, we'll go ahead and give it the win, right? That kind of thing. And also like Fraser already won for Dune One, right?
Right.
So that's the other
Right.
part.
Yeah, so this is the third nomination for Fraser. He was also he was nominated in 2016 for Lion. And he's known like I'm a fan of his work overall. He's known for like Zero Dark 30, Rogue One, The Batman, The
Yeah,
Creator.
I mean,
You can find a deep dive into The Creator.
he's one of the greatest working cinematographers.
Yeah, you can find a deep dive into the creator and the Lorehounds feed. And while I might not have liked the writing in that film, it was certainly I love the cinematography. Jean and I are always on our DC episodes, always arguing about the Batman, which he thinks is a great film and I think is an okay film. But we both agree on the cinematography and the music because we stand Michael Giacchino on this podcast. Um, but yeah, I like Greg Fraser overall. Grieg, I guess I should say Fraser overall. But indeed, he won for Dune last year, and maybe people, or not last year, but a couple years ago, and maybe people are like, well, okay, we'll see next time. But I do think he did the best work. And my second place for my personal choice won't surprise anyone. I keep arguing I wanted Eggers to be in here. Well, I think his cinematographer, Blaschke, is also deserves to be here, deserves the win. I think that the way he always works, by the way, with Robert Eggers. Like Eggers likes to work with the same people over and over again. And so Blaschke was also nominated for The Lighthouse in 2019, another Eggers film. Um, but I think that the artistry and the way that you can just see that they collaborate so well as director and cinematographer, and the way that the camera tells the story of everything that's going on with Ellen, Lily Depp Rose's character, of just uh, with the nods without aping, but just nodding toward the original Nosferatu, nodding toward Faust, another F.W. Murnau film that I talk a lot about in our Nosferatu episode. I really love the work of those two, but I think the favorite is Crawley for The Brutalist
Yeah, I
to
mean,
win.
Lost, like for Nosferatu, I this might be recency bias. I literally just watched this last night, but like
Okay.
just the shadow work, the work with shadows
Mhm.
is just like at the core. That's what like light and shadow is what cinematography deals with, right?
Mhm.
And there is no film that does that better than Nosferatu. Like bar none, I think. Like working with shadow at least. To and like the really interesting shots, like the interesting shot composition. I think on top of that, working with fire, right? The
Mhm.
weird angles that come in at times, right? Like that. I could watch this guy's film all day, basically. Yeah, and then again the comment on Conclave, right? Which didn't get the nomination here. I think could
Mhm.
have and maybe should have.
Mhm.
I think what I really liked about that is that like the film was very, it's not almost like picturesque, right? Like they definitely compose the shots to be almost like Renaissance paintings that you would find in the Sistine Chapel or something like that, right? So I think that's like what they did there. I think maybe the fact that some of them were held more like still shots as opposed to like long like action sequences or
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily action sequences but like in motion shots. I'm thinking about like for example like the cardinal sitting in the auditorium, right? Or like when the smoke comes in toward the end for that one sequence, right? Like those feel almost like snapshots in slow motion as opposed to like a normal cinematography, so to speak, right? So maybe that might be the knock against there potentially.
Yeah. Okay, well, so the BAFTA winner last night was indeed Crawley from The Brutalist. Why? I mean, given that the last film from this team was Vox Lux, which was not very well received. Why do you think that people were so quick to embrace this one? You know, this is kind of a breakthrough in terms of industry respect for Courbet and the rest of
Yeah,
his.
I think, well, like I mentioned before, I think ambition, right? For the film, the scope, and then there's the production element, trying to, um, get this film done for working on it for so long, and then getting it for done for so cheap, right? Is a big part of it. Obviously, you have like the big name of Adrian Brody in there,
Hmm.
kind of like as like a headliner to bring attention to it as well. I think there are themes in the screenplay, whether you agree like how well they were done or not. I think there are themes present within the film
Hmm.
that people can resonate with, like the American
Lots of
dream,
themes.
the
Yeah.
brutality of the American dream. Like oh, you can only succeed if you have like a rich donor, right? And what does that mean, right?
Hmm.
And having like artistic integrity for what you want, struggling, and obviously there's the whole Holocaust element kind of like tied into that
Hmm.
and the political climate and everything. So um I think it's just like the right mix of things that kind of scream Oscar, I think, for
Yeah.
at the end of the day, right? On top of, genuinely having like, at the very least above average performances, I would say, right? If not necessarily the best of the best, definitely above average. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to end up being all timers per se. In fact, looking at this list, I'm trying to think aside from maybe Demi Moore, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any one performance in here aside from that. I would say is going to be like an all-time classic remembered performance per se, right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. What do you think on that regard?
On that regard, oh, now I need to go through. I mean, I feel like the Wicked performances will be. I think, especially
True.
the style of Ariana Grande's
Yeah.
performance. There was such a
Yeah. Though those have the hurdle of having to clear the Idina Menzel, Kristen Chenoweth performances from Broadway, right?
right,
So
which I
so
think that they do, which is shocking.
I don't know. I still I have a playlist of Broadway music, and I still prefer the original Broadway cast musical recording. That's
Okay, I
just
mean
me,
that's fair.
right?
Yeah,
So I mean, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right? If there's good
yeah,
uh, like uh, like obviously for Grande and Erivo, like those are going to become defining roles for their
yeah,
careers, right? But
and
within the
and Mikey Madison in Honora. That's going to
right,
be a
like
defining
these
role.
are going to be defining films for these individuals. But I'm talking about like in the grand scope of like if you think of like
I don't. I
who are
think I'm
the
going to remember Annie from Honora. Just especially
maybe
when she
we'll see.
literally kicks off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could potentially be one there, but I think the only one I think is certified to be like, oh, this is like damn, like one of the all time performances. I think Demi
Uh-huh.
Moore will be up there. I think.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't say the same about too many others in this list.
Hmm. Well, again, yeah, that's why I think that Best Actress race is one to watch, and either between the two of them, and yeah, if it's Torres, I won't be mad either. But I'm rooting for the two of them.
Yeah, Taurus would all. I would love for her to win.
Mm. So you said your favorite for Best Picture is The Brutalist.
Oh yeah, my personal favorite of who I would pick to win would be the Brutalist.
Mhm.
I think at this point it's definitely leaning toward. I have to rerun the numbers and see if it makes sense because like I have this whole other thing of like like the film like for example like best director like 9 out of the 12 best picture winners from the from the last 15 years,
Mhm.
9 of them have had best picture wins, right? That's
Mhm.
9 out of 12 nominated. And then screenplay, like 11 out of 15 have won a screenplay, right? So it's one of those things of like, okay, just checking to make sure like who's predicted to win, who I think is going to win, matches up with like these historical stats before I make
Mm-hmm.
my.
Okay. And are there any other films this year that are nominated or not you want to shout out?
Yeah, Megalopolis is my number one film of the year
Okay.
last year.
I still haven't watched it. I'm curious.
It is not a good film per
Uh-huh.
se, but it is the most film a film can be. And I think it is. I think in an age where like people are like moving to AI and all that, and like making films by like committee and everything, like Megalopolis is clearly the singular vision of one kind of deranged man who kind of has lost the thread a little bit, but it's still his thread. And I think like
Hmm.
the fact that it is so unapologetic about what it is. I'm
It's the most Coppola's ever been.
exactly the most like Babylon is a similar
Mm,
film. I would compare it to
mm.
hot mess of a film, but very
Hot
dedicated
mess.
at what it tries to be and is
Hmm.
unapologetic about it. So I think that's why
Hmm.
I have Megalopolis as my top film
Okay.
of the year. Maybe not the best film, but definitely top film of the year.
Are you in the
Um,
Kino branch by any
I am not.
chance?
I'm in the creators
Oh,
branch.
oh, right.
Um,
Yeah.
let's see, Alien Romulus. Love that. Love that film.
Hmm.
Let's see, Conclave we already talked about. Didi I already mentioned.
Hmm.
Love Didi, especially as an
Yeah. So
Asian American.
Didi, we didn't say what it is. You want to tell people
Oh,
what it
so
is?
Didi is a film by Sean Wang. He was nominated last year for Nine and Waipo in the live action. Oh, it was a documentary sort, I think.
Uh,
Uh,
Documentary
the
short. Yeah.
documentary
Didn't he
short.
win?
He
He
did. He was
won.
just nominated.
Oh.
Documentary short went to I forget who, but it wasn't
Oh,
him.
but I'm thinking about there was the reaction video from his because so the name is the name of the grandmothers on both sides of the family, what you call them, in was it is it Mandarin or Cantonese?
Once Mandarin, I think they're Taiwanese, so I think
They're
Cantonese.
Taiwanese. Okay,
Yeah,
but yeah,
Mandarin.
so he the reaction video of the two grandmothers finding out that they were nominated was adorable. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean they're anyway. One of those grandmothers actually is in Didi as well, and
Right.
it's essentially the story of like this awkward like between middle school and high school during the summer between then of this Taiwanese kid growing up in California during when like AIM was big and you still had MySpace and you worried about
Hmm.
who your top 8 friends were and everything, right? Just kind of captures that vibe of that being an
Yeah.
awkward adolescent so well in the time period and add on like the layer of like Asian Americanness and like what it means to like have this identity. I just I think a very authentic again a very authentic film. I think
Yeah.
that's what I really enjoy. Films that are
I
very
found
authentic.
it disturbingly authentic in terms of like the way I get so frustrated with that main character, I'm like, just
Yeah, but
say
I
the
mean,
thing or, yeah, but
we
that's
were
you're
all there.
supposed to.
We
Yeah.
were all there, so yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
authentic. Last film that we haven't mentioned, we mentioned Monkey Man, Seed of
Hmm.
Sacred Fig, and all that. Look Back. I don't know if you mentioned this one.
No, I
So
haven't.
Look Back is a animated film, very short, only about 60 minutes or so.
Yeah.
If you've heard of the anime Chainsaw Man,
Yeah.
um,
Which I
so
love
so
Chainsaw Man, and I would not expect that for myself, but
Yeah, so it is by the same mangaka. So the mangaka who made Chainsaw Man wrote a one-shot manga called Look Back. Very different vibe than Chainsaw Man, which is like very gory, very kind of
hmm.
crazy. This one is a one-shot about essentially like these two girls in middle school, I think,
Yeah.
who make manga for their school newspaper, right? And how they kind of like inspire each other to become to become better artists, basically kind of like goes into this question of like what does it mean to be an artist, what does it mean to have your own vision, and
Hmm.
what encourages you to make art even if it is very draining of you, right? And
Yeah, and that
you know
one's on
I'm not gonna
Prime, so it's easy to watch.
yeah, I'm not going to spoil everything, but I will also say it is in part a tribute to the animators who died, unfortunately, in an arson attack on the anime studio Kyoto Animation.
Mm.
Actually, if you look at the names of the character, I believe that they actually are kind of like a portmanteau of like it alludes to Kyoto Animation in their name. So
Mm.
kind of a spoiler, hinting at a spoiler that something
Hmm.
happens in the film in relation to that. But definitely check that out. Only again, a very short watch, only 60 minutes. Amazingly animated. Would have loved to see this get the animation nomination. They didn't,
Mm.
unfortunately. I have the manga on my bookshelf, so definitely check that
Okay.
out.
Okay. And final question for you: what do you think could be the biggest upset at the Oscars this year?
So looking at my list, realistically, vector visual effects. I mean, I don't think anything completely unexpected will happen. Um, I mean, yeah, maybe Flow somehow overtaking Wild Robot, but I think that it hasn't won enough precursors to get there.
I'm
Uh,
predicting Flow over Wild Robot, but we'll see. I know
uh,
on paper it doesn't work out, but I'm
yeah,
feeling the vibe.
I would like it too. Um, I would say my biggest potential upset is Conclave winning Best Picture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just because of the way, just because of the way that preferential ballots work, right? Obviously, there's a lot of people who love Honora, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's won a lot of different things. Um, I can't take the feeling there is maybe an older branch of the Academy who maybe is into that kind of film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there might be and then obviously the next up would be okay, well, the Brutalist, but then there's some people who like aren't into like the super long epic
Yeah.
film. So I think the film that everyone likes at least third or fourth on their ballot is probably Conclave.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it has, and that would be the biggest upset. I don't think it's realistically going to happen. I think that's kind of the curse of being like a person who looked at the numbers and the statistics and all that. It has a
Mm-hmm.
lot of faith in those. Is that it's hard for me to make predictions of crazy upsets because the data doesn't really support it. And I'm glad to be wrong when I am wrong. But it kind of takes the fun out of the predicting part of the Oscars, so to speak. At some point, the Oscars becomes like, okay, check, expected that, expected that, basically. So I'm happy to be surprised if something does happen, but predicting something crazy to happen is just not my style, I think.
So Conclave last night at the BAFTAs won both Best British Film and Best Overall Film. Did they do ranked choice voting for
I
overall?
forget if BAFTA does or doesn't. I believe PGA does, which is why Honora winning is a big deal for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if BAFTA does, but also the fact that, you know, um, Ray Fiennes is a British, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a very British cast. Burger is like is like the European as opposed to the crazy American, right?
Right.
So
Well, it's
that might be
funny. Berger went on stage after the Best British Film Award, and he's like, "I'm not even British, but thank you."
exactly right.
He's
So
German.
that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? Like BAFTAs will obviously have a bias toward British films, and so, I mean that's why
Hmm.
Wallace and Gromit wins every year that are nominated, right?
Right. 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 But I guess like it's in European terms, it's sort of like from Britain to Germany, it's just two countries over. That's we're all part of Northwest Europe here. I'm in the middle in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Exactly. Of
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your thoughts and insights, and
course, thank you for having me on.
I hope everyone was taking notes on all those extra films that you should watch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and thanks again for having me on, Elysia. Always a pleasure to talk films. And yeah, if you like what I do, come in and check out the Oscars Death Race podcast, where we try to watch all those nominated films or die trying.
Right. Yeah. So you have a whole bunch of different guests and voices on there to give perspectives on especially the Best Picture nominees. So follow that link in the show notes and you can catch up on those episodes as well. All right. Thank you again, Paulo.
All right, of course. No worries. Thanks for having me on. And until next year.
Thank you again, Paulo. And check the show notes for a link to the Oscars Death Race podcast to hear more from him. And I told Paulo this, but I'm now going to tell all of you. I have, since this recording, seen Megalopolis, and I kind of low-key love it. It's a hot mess, yes, but it's an interesting and engrossing hot mess. I'm honestly not sure whether my love is ironic or genuine, but I actually think I like it better than The Brutalist. I know that's not a high bar with me, obviously, but I keep hearing those two films being compared directly, and yeah, I see why. As I said at the end of the writing episode, I have indeed now also seen the Substance screenplay, and it's incredible. I'll link again the very short behind the scenes video the director herself made showing it off in the show notes. And also, since that episode aired, we actually got another piece of feedback in the acting categories. So we have a voicemail from Lisa, Red Zippy, checking in. So let's listen to Lisa and see who she's rooting for and who she's expecting to win.
Hello, Lorehounds. This is Red Zippy 330 here in Akron, Ohio, aka Lisa. I am leaving a voicemail about the Oscars acting categories and giving you my 2 cents. The best supporting actor and actress appear quite locked in. An upset at the Screen Actors Guild Awards this weekend would add some stakes. Of course, thinking back to Jamie Lee Curtis with Everything Everywhere All at Once. But for supporting actress, I want Zoe Saldana or Ariana Grande to win. Who will win is Zoe, and she deserves it. She blew me away in Emilia Perez. Absolutely blew me away. So that was an Oscar-worthy performance. And really for her body of work in Hollywood, I mean, give her an Oscar. Ariana stood out for me in Wicked. She was so funny and so perfect and so Glinda. So I would be thrilled if she won. Who I do not agree with is a nomination for Felicity Jones for The Brutalist. That was really, just for me, a very poorly performed performance. Oh, there's a phrase. Okay. Anyway, not a fan. I'm a huge fan of her, but not a fan of this role. I wish that Daniel Deadweiler got in for piano lessons. Best Supporting Actor also looks like a lock with Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. I love Kieran. He was amazing in Succession on HBO and deserves all his Emmy nominations and wins. What is tough for me about a performer like Culkin is, well, he's always going to be Kieran Culkin. I really haven't seen him lose himself in a role, but perhaps he does come close in A Real Pain, where he does become very meditative and contemplative. Is that a word? Anyway, so it was a great role. I wouldn't be unhappy if he won. And he's been acting since he was 8, so more power to him. Who I want to win is Edward Norton. He was terrific in A Complete Unknown. He's been nominated 3 other times, and he's one of the best actors of our generation, and he should have an Oscar. For Best Actress, I have yet to see I'm Still Here, and I know Fernanda Torres has a huge international following. So again, we'll see what happens at SAG. But right now I see this as a race between Mikey Madison for Nora and Demi Moore for The Substance. I loved both performances and thrilled that they got nominations. I'm rooting for Demi Moore, both for her performance in this film and, I mean, she's like Hollywood royalty. And she deserves like a body of work Oscar. She's really done some great stuff and made a lot of people in that room a lot of money. I mean, if Sandra Bullock can win for Blind Side and Julia Roberts for Erin Brockovich, then Demi can win for The Substance, but it will probably be Mikey. I wanted to see Nicole Kidman nominated for Baby Girl, and she deserved it, but clearly most others don't see it as her strongest film, which is nuts to me. I mean, she took me places into emotions I didn't know she could take me. That made a huge impression on me. I just thought her performance was amazing. Finally, for Best Actor, I want Ralph Fiennes to win because he is my all-time favorite actor, period, end of sentence. He should have won for Schindler's List. He's one of the best actors we have, period. I saw him from the second row in his Tony-nominated performance in Faith Healer on Broadway. So, but he's not going to win this. I'm afraid it'll be Adrian Brody for The Brutalist. I wanted to go to Timothy Chalamet if Rafe can't get it, but it's rare that the Academy awards young men in this category. It took Leonardo DiCaprio 5 nominations before he got a win, and Chalamet is only at 2. But Brody, coincidentally, is the exception when he won for The Pianist at age 29. Chalamet is the same age. Yeah, so maybe. Yeah, but Adrian Brody has the momentum. Again, we'll see at SAG. So that is all for my acting category thoughts, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We have some different takes, but it's really good to have that range of opinions. And so Lisa mentioned the SAG Awards. So just to update on the 3 major precursors that have handed out awards since Paolo and I recorded. Well, actually, BAFTA was before that, but I didn't shout out all the awards yet for the acting categories. So I did say Conclave dominated at the BAFTAs, and it also took the biggest award by surprise at SAG. But Honora won the BAFTA for Best Actress and the Casting Award, a category that's being added to the Oscars lineup as of next year. Brutalist won Director for Brady Corbet, as we said, at the BAFTA, but after wins from the Directors Guild, Spirit Awards, and others, Sean Baker is considered the frontrunner in the directing category for Honora. And I just wanted to add, as a personal note, how deeply impressed I am with Coralie Farget, the director of The Substance, and just the way her mind works. I've been doing deep dives into her films and even a Star Wars tribute that she made as a teenager. And I recommend looking up the behind-the-scenes short she directed about her work on The Substance. It's incredible, the creativity and talent that went into bringing the images in her brain to life. So I'll link that in the show notes as well. I am now pissed all over again that it didn't get recognized in cinematography. It absolutely deserves it, and for practical VFX. In cinematography, though, Jomo Frey took that at the Spirit Awards for Nickel Boys. So that's some vindication for those who are upset that it wasn't nominated in that category at the Oscars. At the BAFTAs, this award went to The Brutalist, as we said, underlining it as a major threat in this category. And since we mentioned this award in this episode, David Johnson from VFX Oscar nominee Alien Romulus won the EE Rising Talent Awards over Mikey Madison, who had to console herself with her Best Actress BAFTA and Spirit Award instead. Adrian Brody won Lead Actor at the BAFTAs, but then Timothée Chalamet surprised at SAG, which is again the largest voting body at the Oscars. So, Kieran Culkin and Zoe Saldana continue to collect statues in the supporting categories for Real Pain and Amelia Perez, respectively. And by the way, Paula brought up a couple of times his film Dee Dee, the awkwardly realistic coming-of-age story from Sean Wang. And that did well at the Spirit Awards. It took home Best First Feature and Best First Screenplay. And the Robert Altman Award for Ensemble Cast at the Spirits went to His Three Daughters, a Netflix movie about estranged sisters coping with an ailing father that was once expected to get a lot more awards attention for its stars Carrie Coon, Elizabeth Olsen, and Natasha Lyonne, which are three of my personal favorite actresses, but no, I haven't seen it yet. As a little aside on Scandal Watch, I should mention that there was some controversy surrounding the Apprentice director, Ali Abbasi, who was accused of behaving inappropriately towards someone. But he showed Carla Sofia Gascon how it's done. He stepped forward and he said that he did jokingly smack someone in the rear, and he realizes now that it was inappropriate. And the so-called scandal has already calmed down, though I guess it's also easier to forget as that film isn't a frontrunner in any categories. But just to keep you updated. Anyway, come chat with us about all of this on Discord, where there's a special award season channel under current shows, as well as channels for everything else. We also want to hear your thoughts on this year's Oscars. Please send them to oscars@thelorehounds.com, and I think we'll do a wrap-up episode in the subscriber feed at least, so we can share it there. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with someone else you think might like some Oscar insights as well. Next up is the finale, talking the 10 Best Picture nominees with David. In the meantime, check the show notes for links to all the episodes in this series so far, plus last year's series, not to mention this year's Oscar-nominated movies we've done deep dives into. And also check out mine Jean's reaction to the new Captain America movie. More non-Oscar content coming your way. Actually, a lot of it. We're figuring out our coverage plans for this spring's onslaught of content. But you can expect some sort of sporadic coverage for White Lotus and Daredevil Born Again. And we're trying to figure out something for Doctor Who too, because there will be full coverage for both The Wheel of Time and Andor with all the extras. We're cooking up a new format for Andor to make sure your coverage isn't cut short with the wonky release schedule. And I believe there will be a weekly The Last of Us coverage as well. Of course, Severance still wrapping up in the separate Severance feed, nearing the end of the season. Will there be answers? Well, there will at least be more visits to the supply closet for Supercast and Patreon subscribers and season pass holders. Check out the link tree in the show notes for more information about those options. Subscribers also have access to a Daredevil prep episode that's coming this weekend, a just-released Second Breakfast episode, and this month's 11sies about David Lynch's Eraserhead that's coming up in a couple days. Explore the link tree in the show notes to find all those feeds and also explore the affiliates. My Will Shift Dust, the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, Radioactive Ramblings, which is covering Invincible now, and Nevermind the Music. These are all active. And of course, no true Lorehounds episode is over until we shout out the people whose support makes this all possible. Thank you to Discord server boosters, Aaron K., Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Athena Ajalea, Tina, Lestu, Nancy M., Ghost of Perdition, Radioactive Richard. And thank you especially to our Lorehounds, to all of our subscribers, and most of all to our Lore Masters, our highest tier of subscribers, and those are Samartian, Michael G., Michelle E., Brian P., SC, Peter O.H., Bettina W., Adam S., Nancy M., Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H., Sarah L., Gareth C., Matthew M., Sarah M., DJ Miwa, Andra B., Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T., Alex V., Sub-Zero, Aaron K., Dally V., Mothership 61, Gnarls? Kathy W., Lestu, Jeffrey B., Elysia U., Neil F., Ben B., Scott F., Stephen N., Julia F., Carly S., Ilmariel, and always last, Adrian. Thank you all for listening. Please do pass this episode along to anyone else you think would enjoy it. See you next to talk about the big one, Best Picture. David and I will remind you what's nominated, what it's about, give you our takes, talk the odds, and check in with members of the community on their thoughts and predictions. See you there.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, David here. Severance is back. The Lorehounds are partnering with Properly Howard to bring you in-depth weekly coverage of Season 2. Join me, John, Anthony, and Steve as we unpack every twist, theory, and revelation. We've created a dedicated feed just for our Severance coverage. Simply search for Severance Lorehounds in your podcast app, or find the direct link in our link tree. Our weekly episodes dig deep into the show's mysteries, themes, and bigger questions about identity and consciousness that makes Severance so compelling. Season Pass and regular community subscribers get ad-free access to our weekly episodes, plus exclusive content like our Supply Closet bonus series, featuring fascinating conversations with experts like the team from Nevermind the Music. We've explored the neuroscience of memory and personality, decoded the hidden meanings in the show's musical themes, and there's much more to come. You'll also get Steve and Anthony's complete Season 1 rewatch series. We believe in total transparency with our listeners, and unlike mammalians nurturable, we're happy to share all of our secrets. Find the link for the Severance feed in the show notes below, or search Severance Lorehounds wherever you get your podcasts. Come theorize with us about what's really happening at Lumen.
And remember, the episode you think you're about to hear is merely a reflection of the episode that